Chapter 549, I trust Ling Tian. Okay, then it's a deal. Shui Qian'er stretched out her hand, we'll seal palms as a vow. Ling Tian stretched out his hand as well, and lightly pressed forward. With a pa sound, the two palms met. Ling Tian only felt a soft and smooth feeling, as though he had come into contact with flawless jade, and could not help but shake in his heart. In that instant, he felt as though he did not want to retract his hand. As for Shui Qian'er, her pair of eyes were fixed on Ling Tian's face, with a dreamy look on her face that was hard to comprehend, and she too forgot to take her hand back. It was after a long while that Shui Qian'er suddenly withdrew her hand at lightning speed. She placed her hand within her bosom and turned around, but Ling Tian saw that her eyes were already red, and there were obvious signs of unshed tears. Ling Tian pretended to let out an easy laugh as he stood up, saying, "After a while I'll get someone to send you back, and secretly send Shui Qian'er and his group to your hands. You'll be able to take revenge for your brother then." Her body trembled at Ling Tian's words, and she clenched her teeth as she spat her words out. "I will, oh I definitely will." Her voice was full of fury and hate as well as an irrevocable determination. Looking at this rare side of her, Ling Tian lightly sighed before heavily saying, "While I don't wish to nag so much, I still have to say this. For those three, it would be good to just kill Shui Qian'er, and leave the other two until 2.5 years later before killing them." "Why?" Shui Qian'er emotionally turned around. "Those three jerks were involved in the death of my brother, and I hate that I cannot reduce them to 1,000 pieces. While Shui Qian'er is the main culprit and must be killed, the other two are also accomplices, not at all inferior to that bastard. Why do I have to wait for another 2.5 years? I'll definitely kill them to avenge my brother. My brother wants to live but has no way to, and I must make sure that his enemies all die in front of him." Shui Qian'er's tone was frosty, even causing Ling Tian to shiver with the cold. He did not dare to let her know that the Ling family actually played a part in scheming for her brother's death, or else that could be their calamity in the future. A radiant light shone across his pupils as Ling Tian insisted, "Not only must you let the two of them go, you must also keep the fact that your brother has died from the people back in Heavenly Wind. All of this must wait until 2.5 years later." Ling Tian coldly stared at her. "If you do not wish for the Shui family to perish in the short term, then it would be best you did as you're told. The decision lies in your hands." Shui Qian'er was naturally not someone without brains and was merely pushed by her emotions due to her blood brother dying. Having been awoken by Ling Tian's cold harsh reality, she immediately understood what Ling Tian was trying to say. "You mean a broken bar, the generational battle?" Ling Tian nodded in response. "That's right. In another 2.5 years it will be the destined battle between the Yu and Shui families. Right now, if you kill all of them and send news of your brother's death, the killers of one's sons cannot share the same heaven, and your father, as well as your uncles, will not be able to take it. The Shui family already has no buffer for any internal affairs, and the bloodbath will immediately start. Regardless of who wins or loses, the Shui family will lose a great deal of its strength. When the generational battle then starts, how many people will you all be able to gather? At that time, the Yu family with its prestige rising to the stars will never let you go. Even if you have my help, it will be to no avail. As such, the cleansing of the Shui family will have to wait until the generational battles end before it can officially proceed." Ling Tian stared straight at her. "The generational battle is also your best bet currently." Shui Qian'er, however, shook her head sadly. "I'm afraid that's not possible anymore. Everybody is aware that my brother's injuries are incurable, and I'm afraid the entire family already knows of this matter. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't hide it." "Oh, a broken bar in that Kazi broken bar." Ling Tian breathed deeply as he took 2 steps before his eyebrows suddenly raised up. "If that's the case, then tell your family that although your esteemed brother's injuries were life-threatening, you paid a huge price and managed to move justice from the Beyond Heavens sect to use his peerless medical craft to treat your brother. While he managed to save his life, due to the threat, he will have to be quarantined for the time being within Beyond Heavens until he passes the danger phase. As for the perpetrator Shui Qian'er, after taking revenge, then I'll arrange for him to be thrown into the Azure Pavilion, creating a scene where he went mad and died due to jealousy. While there might be suspicions, but without proof, no one would do anything, and you can drag this on indefinitely. How about it? Shui Qian'er's eyes gleamed. While this may be able to confuse and mislead everyone, I'm just afraid a broken bar. A hurt look crossed her face, that brother's death will already be a great shock to father, and with us hiding the truth, I'm afraid a broken bar. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's a type of lie called benevolence. Besides, you're doing so because you have no choice. I'm sure that if your father knew about this, he would not blame you for your choices. Ling Tian seriously spoke. Even if your father finds out that your brother had already passed away 2 years ago, without the usual morning and evening visits, he would also gradually have gotten used to it. By that time, when he sees how outstanding you are, grasping hold of the Shui family as well as avenging your brother, his hurt would also be lessened. However, if you were to pass on the message of death now, this sort of impact is not something everyone can bear. With Ling Tian's meticulous planning, Shui Qian'er finally relaxed. However, a thought flashed through her mind and she blurted out, "Young noble Ling, you mentioned just now that Justice is a peerless physician. Is that true? Isn't he the martial order medallion owner, the strongest martial expert on earth? That Justice guy is a talent that defies whatever this world stands for. His knowledge is unimaginable. From medicine to astrology, cultural and military strategies, there's not one that he isn't a master of. Actually, you are also connected to him by some sort of destiny." That day, the one who forked out 50 taels of silver to buy the red sandalwood pearl from the southern sea was him. Ling Tian looked at her in a strange manner. "Indeed, I thought so. He slaughtered over 100 of my men with one person's strength, and to turn out that his motive was really to obtain the red sandalwood pearl. If not for him, how would both my uncles die such a miserable death?" Shui Qian'er spat with hate. If it wasn't for Justice's wanton killing that day, both brother and sister wouldn't have landed in such a state today. It was natural for Shui Qian'er to hate him. "Oh great Miss Shui, I have to give you a piece of advice. Give up any thoughts of revenge. Justice's cultivation, martial skills, and movement techniques are already nearing the pinnacle, each without a match, or else why would I have to hide from him for a year? Since we're both allies, I have to caution you," Ling Tian stated. "This sort of mentality to seek revenge would only cause more needless sacrifices. I do not believe that nobody can overtake someone their entire life. My family's elder, Shui Wupo, has an innate talent for martial arts and is a peerless expert of his generation. He was able to match blows with the pinnacle expert of Heavenly Star, the A Fantasy Universe Zhuo Meng. Maybe I can move him to seek revenge." Shui Qian'er seemed to have the utmost confidence in her elder. This was greeted by a sarcastic smile from Ling Tian. "To be able to fight evenly with Zhuo Meng, is it a big deal? You know that he comes from one of the 3 great sects, the direct line of descent under the above heavens sect founded Meng Ryuo Zhu, but did you know that the same Zhuo Meng died under the hands of Justice? There's such a thing?" Shui Qian'er's face paled. To think that such an expert existed in the world. Then a look of joy appeared on her face. "If that's the case, then with his knowledge, maybe he could really heal my brother, or maybe he can even save him." Ling Tian did not know whether to laugh or to cry. Women were really a strange breed of creatures. The first moment thinking of revenge, the second suddenly wanting their enemy to save their loved ones. He could only helplessly reply her, "Your brother could only survive until now because of Chinner's divine ice formula, placing most of his body under cryostasis. While it slows down his rate of death, it's actually burning up all of his life. Furthermore, it is easy for injustice to find you, but do you think it's easy to do the opposite? What's more, you don't even possess a martial order medallion for him to take action. Lastly, Justice's medical skills might be miraculous, but he is after all a man, not a god. Your brother a broken bar." Shui Qian'er only stood here for a long time, before finally sighing and lowly speaking, "At this time, this is also the best choice." While her voice was low, it struck heavily in Ling Tian's ears like a lofty mountain. It had taken her so long to finally discover a chance to save her brother, but it was burned almost immediately. Who would be able to take it? Ling Tian no longer spoke, instead standing up and beginning to walk outside. Before he reached the doorstep, he heard her softly whisper to herself, in a voice that was barely perceptible, "Ling Tian, this time, Even if you didn't give me any benefits, I would still have agreed. I don't know if you have any other sort of ideas, but this time, I have chosen to throw all my trust towards you. It might be because I do not have any path of retreat left, but to leave such a matter towards someone who is my opponent, my enemy, it is still a first for me. I hope that you will not disappoint me again. Ling Tian's hand paused on the doorknob. Behind him, Shui Qian'er's voice grew more resolute. This is because you are Ling Tian, and because I have no one else to trust. Hence I choose to trust you. Just like how the monarch has the ambition to surpass the heavens, I believe in Ling Tian. I believe in Ling Tian. This caused a huge jolt in Ling Tian's heart, and he slowly turned around. He saw Shui Qian'er curled up on the chair, her head half drooped and her back towards him. Ling Tian suddenly felt as though this back was extremely lonely and desolate. I've said before, from the first time I met you, I already hoped that we would not turn into enemies. This sentence was true, as were my intentions then. After finishing his sentence, he did not turn back his head as he walked out. Shui Qian'er's body trembled, and rigidly maintained her posture without turning her head. However, a patter was heard as 2 wet teardrops fell onto the ground. Chapter 550, Sending him off to the west. Walking out of the room, Ling Tian drew a long breath. He mysteriously felt as though his mood was a little heavy, as though his heart was being weighted down by a lofty mountain. White robes flashed, and Li Zhu smilingly appeared in front of him. Is it done, Mr. Ling who everyone loves? Ling Tian stared at her with a sour mood. Ling Jian's sword is already placed on your neck, and you still have the leisure time to stroll around? Be careful that your face doesn't end up being disfigured. If your looks are destroyed, then you won't be a witch in name anymore. Oh, I'm so scared. Li Zhu stuck at her neck like a proud swan, raising her head as though in disdain. Just based on him? Maybe if he practices for another decade or so, he might have a chance. When the time comes, we'll see how this lady beats up a sandbag then. Like you said, I'm a witch, so how can I play the part if I don't have the skills of a witch? Ling Tian waved his hand a little depressedly. Then my great miss, please find your little black cottage to go and fantasize. This noble here is not in a very good mood now, and I won't entertain you. Ling Tian turned around, ready to scram. Ha! Young noble Ling rushing off to settle his feelings after ending a day of flirting, is it? Grinning, Li Zhu suddenly blocked his path. I found out something very interesting. Would you like to hear it? Nope. Ling Tian felt like hugging his head and screaming. I've been eating air for food and camping outside for the last few days, and I would like some good sleep right now. Li Zhu laughed craftily, and suddenly started talking to herself. Everyone says that a woman goes about conquering her man in order to dominate the world, but I just found out that our young noble Ling seems to run opposite to that. As she laughed, she slowly spoke each word. Our great noble Ling here seems to use the method of conquering women to dominate the whole world. Ha 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 ha. Broken bar. A row of black lines appeared on Ling Tian's forehead as he clenched his teeth and spat out. This is really interesting. I've just found out that our great Miss Li here is also a woman. So, do you want to conquer, or be conquered? The lass snorted in response. So what? Can you conquer me? I'm okay with it if you want to try. As she replied, she sent over a flirtatious glance. However, not being too used to such actions, it looked like she was glancing at him from the corner of her eyes. Ling Tian trembled with fright, his face turning white. He immediately circulated his movement technique and ran off as fast as he could. If not for the improvement in his movement technique, most likely he would not be able to outrun her. Before this, Li Zhu was the only woman that Ling Tian could not chase or broken bar. The night sky slowly descended, and following the flow of time, everything turned dark. Ling Tian's figure flashed around the courtyard, and after circling it once, he landed on a branch of a tree towering the fringes of the compound, just like a falcon. He cautiously landed, and only after checking his surroundings did he sigh in relief, and leaped down from the tree, merging into the shadows. On that same night, The Shui family who came from afar had a commotion. This few matters let those injured and dead members of the Shui family feel even more anxious and fearful. The young nobles from afar, Shui Qianzhong and Shui Qianhai, were found hanging naked on a tree, their faces beaten and swollen, riddled with injuries and on their last breaths. As for the last one, Shui Qianhu, he got extremely drunk inside the Smoky Thea Pavilion, started a fight with another expert as he vied for attention, and was killed on the spot. His corpse was terrible to behold. This scene was even witnessed by more than a few hundred people in Broken Bar. As for the little princess of the family, Shui Qian'er used 1,000-year blood ginseng and 2 ice jade mangoes as well as 4 trunks of 100-year red jade ginsengs as the price to move Yi Qingchen beyond heavens, allowing him to invite the #1 expert justice to save the dying Shui Qianhuan. With the Ling family escorting him, Shui Qian'er proceeded to Beyond Heavens Sir Broken Bar. The supposedly dead Shui Qianhuan was suddenly saved. This news no doubt left many of those with nefarious intentions dispirited. Outside the city, in the darkness, a black painted carriage silently stopped at the roadside. The carriage seemed to be full of misfortune, and one could even make out the soft sounds of a female crying, full of the sadness of losing a loved one. Under the dusty light of the oil lamp, the direct descendant of the Shui family, the only male heir Shui Qianhuan's chest had already turned into a deathly shade of black. He used all the strength he had left, and stretched out his right hand, stroking the soft hair of his sister. A look of release was on his face, and even a hint of satisfaction, as he thought how he managed to stab a long sword straight into the heart of Shui Qianhu. So what if he died? In the end, he made sure the perpetrator died before him. Shui Qianhuan thought to himself as he smiled. From outside, the sound of the wind grew louder, causing the entire carriage to shake. Outside were 6 strong and burly guards standing on guard, all without a single expression. Rua Broken Bar, promise brother a Broken Bar that you'll live on happily, and help brother to take care of dad and mama Broken Bar. Shui Qianhuan's mouth slowly moved, staring at his sister's face. Brother can't make it anymore, but the bloodline of the direct Shui descendants cannot fade away. You must use your last breath to prevent it from landing in the hands of those despicable people. Promise me. Shui Qianhuan began to violently cough, yet his eyes were still dead set on Shui Qian'er. He coughed till he could not catch his breath, and with a choking sound, a mouthful of black-purple blood was spat out. Promise me. Shui Qian'er's face was wet with tears, and she nodded her head, her tears falling like pearls dropping off from a broken necklace onto his body. Shui Qianhuan seemed to use all his strength to catch his breath. Suddenly, his eyes turned warm, and his voice too became dreamy as he spoke. I'm not sure about Lady Ling Tian a Broken Bar, but I hope she can a Broken Bar live on happily a Broken Bar if there's a next life a Broken Bar cough 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 a Broken Bar. A shadow flashed, and the light suddenly dimmed by quite a bit. Brother Qianhuan, this younger brother here came to send you off one last time. Ling Tian was clad entirely in black, and he slipped into the carriage like a wisp of vapor. Looking at Qianhuan, he warmly spoke, I know, you have something to say to me too, right? Shui Qianhuan slowly nodded his head, his gaze turning penetrative. It's you, Ling Tian, you actually didn't die, you managed to escape the pursuit from justice. I only have a word for you, respect. Ling Tian smiled in response, between the two of us, one has to definitely remain alive, right? Hearing this, Shui Qianhuan also laughed out even as he coughed. That's right. He then seriously faced Ling Tian, to be able to see you today, I'm really gratified. Ling Tian remained silent as he nodded, as though he understood. Shui Qianhuan seemed to rouse himself up further as he held on, struggling as he continued to say, do you know, Ling Tian, I've never looked up to anyone before in my life, neither have I feared anyone, not even my dad nor Shui Wubo, because I believed that one day, I would soar above them. However, you are the first one, and the only one now. When you routed my 400,000 strong army, I already knew that I was far too lacking compared to you. I regret this very much, for I thought we would have the chance to cross swords once again. Now it seems like I won't be having this chance. Ling Tian leisurely sat in front of him, slowly speaking, I too feel the same regret. For your two aristocratic families, Opponents of mine are really few and between. As for my generation, the only person is you. Thus, while you feel regret, I feel that it's a pity." Shui Qianhuan's eyes lit up and his breathing became rough as he exclaimed, "You a broken bar is what you said true? You really consider me as an opponent?" Ling Tian laughed. "Then do you expect me to treat those trashes Shui Qianhu or Shui Qianzhang as my opponents instead? No, they're not worthy." "How could they be worthy?" Shui Qianhuan shook his head emotionally, before looking at Ling Tian and sincerely beaming. "Ling Tian, thank you. Thank you for having been my opponent in the past." The latter earnestly said, "I was supposed to return to the capital, but I suddenly thought of you and came over to send you off for your final journey. No matter what, the Yellow Springs Road is far. I wish you bon voyage. See you again in the future." A smile surfaced on the corners of Shui Qianhuan's mouth, as he warmly replied, "I actually had a lot of things I felt I didn't arrange well, but time and tide wait for no man. However, since you're here today, I can also relax now." He kept his smile, solemnly looking at Ling Tian. "Ling Tian, please forgive Qianhuan here for sharing my inner worries with a stranger like you. I need you to help me with two things. Please do not reject a dying man's wishes." Looking at Shui Qianhuan on the side, Ling Tian smiled and replied, "Actually, I already know what you want me to help you with." "You don't need to say it." Shui Qianhuan stubbornly shook his head instead, fixing his attention on him fully. "Ling Tian, please take good care of my sister, my only sister." It was unknown where he suddenly got his strength from, but Shui Qianhuan straightened himself fully, and his withered hand grabbed onto the wrist of Ling Tian. A bright light flashed in his eyes, like the soul fire of a specter, as his face revealed some jealousy. "And a broken bar, and there's also Lady Ling Qi, a broken bar. You a broken bar must give her happiness, a lifetime of peace and happiness." Ling Tian's eyes narrowed, and his warm smile carried a hint of killing intent. "Of course I will take care of my woman. Ling Chen will have a life of peace and happiness. I'll not trouble young Master Shui to worry for her." Shui Qianhuan smiled dimly, hanging his head down low as though he had finished using all his strength. As his figure fell back down, Ling Tian found out that his chest, where the divine ice formula had frozen into one black chunk of flesh, had actually begun to exude a layer of water. As for his face, his muscles suddenly began to twitch and jerk. Unbelievable pain once again attacked Shui Qianhuan. 7 days. The effective period of the divine ice formula flashed by in an instant. The death date of Shui Qianhuan was near. Standing by the side, Shui Qianhuan naturally spotted this, and a distraught expression appeared in her eyes as she looked at her brother, then Ling Tian, before suddenly grabbing onto his lapels and shaking them hard. "Ling Tian, please save him, a broken bar. Please save my brother, a broken bar. I beg you to save him, a broken bar. I can do anything you wish. Please save my brother." At the last part, Shui Qianhuan seemed to be using all her strength to shout. The person in question stood like a block of wood, without the slightest trace of expression on his face. Shui Qianhuan's injuries had already reached a terminal stage. Let alone Ling Tian, even if justice came, or even if a celestial being came down, they all had no ways to do so. Shui Qianhuan's throat started to let out weird gurgling noises, his breathing seeming to have turned into a pair of broken bellows. He had to use every single ounce of willpower he possessed so as to not scream from the extreme pain that racked every single one of his nerves. He utilized the last breath of air to shout out, "Ruer, send a broken bar. Me broken bar." A violent tremor worked its way across Shui Qianhuan, and she suddenly let go of Ling Tian's lapels, taking a step back before falling onto the ground. How mentally strong-willed she was! When faced with the prospect of killing her own brother, it was not something which could be done just because it was asked. Even if she knew that her brother could not be saved, that living was a pain in itself, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Shui Qianhuan then turned his gaze towards Ling Tian, his eyes full of pleading as he begged, "Ling Tian, a broken bar, please, a broken bar, please help me, broken bar, a broken bar, don't want a broken bar, to a broken bar." Let out any screams or broken bar even as his body shook. Tsunamis of pain continuously smashed on his nerves, causing huge droplets of sweat to appear on his forehead even as he endured it. However, The eyes he cast towards Ling Tian were full of urgency. Clang! With a cold expression, Ling Tian pulled his sword out of the sheath, and the darkness seemed to have been lit up with a flash of light in that instant. Think a broken bar, you a broken bar. Shui Qianhuan tightly clamped his mouth shut. He was afraid that if he were to leave it open, what would come out next would be screams and groans. The sword's name is Heaven Splitter, sending off the monarch to the west. Ling Tian solemnly gazed at Shui Qianhuan. We'll meet again in the indefinite future. Have a good journey. The next instant, the Heaven Splitter had already accurately stabbed into Shui Qianhuan's heart. Ling Tian's internal energy was sent out, shattering every last bit of life within the former. Shui Qianhuan's body spasmed, and a look of gratitude passed by his face before he closed his eyes. His face calmed down, and on his final moment, a look of release, coupled with some loneliness, was left on his face. The grandson of the direct line of the Shui family, Shui Qianhuan, was dead. Shui Qianhuan's hands trembled as she looked at her brother. She pitifully screamed out in agony, but suddenly cut off midway, looking as though she was frozen in time. Even her eyeballs stopped moving around, and all of a sudden, she looked like an idiot. Ling Tian sighed as he returned the sword to the scabbard, before stretching out and pressing onto her high Tian acupoint. This did not cause harm to the body and could allow a person to immediately sink into a deep sleep. The Shui Qianhuan right now was completely defenseless, keeling to the ground without a sound and fainting into a deep sleep. Coming out of the carriage, Ling Tian instructed, bring the entire carriage over to the Ling family courtyard and hand it to Ling Chen. She will know what to do. When he finished, he stared up at the sky. Right now, the only person who could probably ease Shui Qianhuan and the entire heavenly star would be Ling Chen and him. Thinking about it, Ling Tian felt as though Shui Qianhuan was quite pitiful. In the entire heavenly star, with millions of people, how many could she dare to trust? A mere 2 people, and from a certain perspective, one of them was even her enemy. Her own brother had actually died because of the people in the same family as her, and her entire family could not be trusted. A broken bar. Tragic. What a tragedy this was. To a 17 to 18-year-old young lass, no matter how strong-willed she was, it would still be an unbearable pain in her life. Standing by the side, Ling Kai respectfully bowed, and with a light noise, the carriage turned back towards the Ling outer courtyard. Ling Tian's body vanished like lightly dissipating smoke. Making around, he did not find anything strange, nor marks of carriage or people, before he eased his worries. Seeing the carriage slowly merging into the darkness, his body flashed, and the night here regained its peace. Chapter 551, Zhao Yu's Heart. Ling Tian glided along with the night wind, a bland expression on his face. Regarding Shui Qianhuan, Ling Tian still did not treat him with much importance. It was only in his death that Ling Tian treated him as an opponent. Or else, he wouldn't have used the Heaven Splitter to send Shui Qianhuan off. This was also a sort of consolation. When Shui Qianhuan was there, Ling Qian's divine ice formula had already lost its effect, and his entire body was already bereft of any internal energy. As such, he had to bear with the intense pain. For an ordinary person on the verge of death, to reject an expert's offer of help to circulate their power and ease his pain, choosing to bear it on his own, just based on this willpower, it was enough to change the expression of anyone who heard of it. On that point, Ling Tian respected Shui Qianhuan. People who could achieve this level of willpower were really too few. Even before death, he still retained the pride and arrogance that belonged to him. Thus, Ling Tian pulled out his sword, the Heaven Splitter. While the Heaven Splitter was only just a sword, in this world, it was the symbol of power at its utmost peak. To die under the Heaven Splitter was a sort of comfort to Shui Qianhuan, who had a death sentence hanging over him. Those who obtain the Heaven Splitter obtain the world. This sentence, to Ling Tian, was just a joke, an amusing act, merely a sharp weapon to attract the entire world to fight for it. However, the sad part was that the majority of the people who did not have the knowledge were too many. If there was only one person, then it would be of no consequence, but if thousands upon thousands of people said so, then there was a huge persuasive power. No one could overlook such a power, including Ling Tian. This might be the power obtained through conforming, but when left untouched for a long period it would still become useful with a huge influence. That was because there were at least 90% of such conformers in the entire world. Ling Tian suddenly thought of a point. Why did justice gift the heaven splitter to me? The half-year bet on pursuit, directly cancelling it was still acceptable. But gifting the sword after cancelling the battle, the symbol of the ruler of the world. Could it be broken bar that justice's true objective was a broken bar? Ling Tian took in a breath of cold air. If this was really the case, then he not using it, not borrowing its influence, he would be a total idiot then. At this age and in this world, the heaven splitter was akin to a ruler's seal of the emperor of the country during the feudal times. Indeed an extravagant gift. Ling Tian suddenly halted in his footsteps, at the same time suppressing all the waves in his mind. In front was the Ling residence, the place where he spent 17 years of his life growing. Looking at the words, a Ling residence flickering in the dark, Ling Tian took in a deep breath of air. A few months ago he was forced to leave, and this time, he actually felt a tinge of homesickness. Shaking his head, he banished this weird thought of his, and his body straightened as he floated straight into the courtyard, towards the place whom he was familiar to the utmost with. If he did not want to alert anyone, even if justice was inside the residence now he still would not be able to detect Ling Tian. Just as he passed by his own little courtyard, Ling Tian made an amazing discovery. There was actually light coming from the lamp dimly showing inside his room, and that was his personal bedroom. After he left, Yu Bingyan and Ling Qian both moved to the Ling family courtyard. His room should have long been empty. Why would there still be a person staying there? Under his curiosity, Ling Tian did a flip in the air and dashed towards his place. In half the time it took for a person to draw a breath, he was already lightly landing beside the window, without sight nor sound. From inside came a low sigh, and a clear and feminine voice sounded, "Little brother Tian, it's been so long, yet you're still not back. Do you know how much I worry about you? The news has spread that no one has yet to survive the pursuit of the martial order medallion owner from beyond heavens. I don't believe it. You'll definitely come back safely, I only just need to know that you're safe." Just that. Ling Tian's heart also stopped. This was Princess Zhao Yu's voice. Why was she here? Dabbing his fingers with saliva, he gently pierced a hole through the paper covering the window and peered through. Inside the room, Princess Zhao Yu was supporting her chin with one hand, as she languidly sat on the chair Ling Tian always used, staring entranced at the lamp in front of her. Her face was streaked with worry and reminiscence. "Oh my enemy, how could you just up and leave just like that, without even leaving a single word of explanation? What am I going to do? The entire city knows that I, Zhao Yu, am the wife bestowed upon you by my father, but you, have you truly treated me as your wife?" In the room, Princess Zhao Yu softly sighed. Looking at how she behaved, it was as though Ling Tian was really sitting in front of her, silently listening. "Could it be that you're still worried that my mom and I will blame you?" Although the Ling family was involved in the destruction of the imperial family, causing the sky-bearing empire to change owners, in the end, it was imperial father who first betrayed the Ling family. On this point my mother and I are clear. Him falling to such a stage, and yet not being killed by the Ling family is already a show of mercy. While I may be the daughter of the Long family, I'm also the niece of the Ling family. Seeing such a scene is already satisfying for me. Do you know that? Your heart now should be extremely relaxed, right? However, do you know how terrible it feels for me to be trapped in between the Long and Ling family? The Ling family counterattacking is not wrong, but in the end, no matter his mistakes, he is still my father. A broken bar sigh. If we become husband and wife in the future, will you still give me the cold shoulder? Princess Zhao Yu stared misty-eyed at the flame, with a light blush dusting her face. Ling Tian's heart leapt at her confession. Long Xiang wholly deserved his situation, but Princess Zhao Yu was a complete bystander being caught up in the raging firestorm. She was completely innocent, and added on was the fact that she was announced to the world that she was being betrothed to Ling Tian. Thus, Zhao Yu's situation was actually the most awkward. To speak the truth, Ling Tian really did not place Zhao Yu within his heart, or he should say, he did not treat her as his woman. While she was Ling Tian's cousin, not even comparing to the place Ling Tian had, Even Yu Bingyan or Yanzu was already far above her. In his escape, Ling Tian probably did not even think about her at all. Only at this moment did Ling Tian feel a weird and sour feeling in his heart. Towards Zhao Yu, Ling Tian felt a sense of comfort and warmth just like with an older sibling, and being with Zhao Yu would make Ling Tian extremely relaxed. This sort of feeling was separate from any relationship feelings. Speaking of which, this sweet-tempered cousin of his had found him extremely likable ever since young. Even though he had carried the black tag of Skybearing's #1 profligate, she had always shown tolerance for that. Having grown up in the profound palace inner courtyard, her character was especially simple, and by right unable to survive in the inner palace. However, being Ling Ran's only daughter, the eldest daughter of Long Xiang, it was precisely her simpleness and kindness that invoked Long Xiang's love for her. However, without any schemes, and with the majority of power held by Empress Yang, her days were not very comfortable. The only place she probably ever felt safe was the Ling family, where she spent many a day in happiness. It was also where she created trouble with Ling Tian. A pity that Ling Tian was a person of 2 lifetimes, and hence did not have any sort of childish fantasies to speak of, thus their communications were few in between. However, it was this sort of pure and simple girl, that because of a mistake made by her elders, landed in such a miserable state. Ling Tian was very clear that Zhao Yu was someone who was deeply traditional and only knew how to obey others without resistance. Even when her own marriage was used to win over the subjects' loyalty, she never tried to resist or fight for her rights. Long Xiang had betrothed her to Ling Tian, and she had just accepted, even happily so. This was because, while Ling Tian had the black name of a profligate, he was still someone she knew and was familiar with, better than some unknown husband. As Ling Tian slowly unveiled his shining talents, Zhao Yu also started to feel more and more pleased, for ever since she was betrothed, she had treated herself as Ling Tian's wife, with him as her one and only husband. Seeing her husband change for the better, she was filled with joy, especially during the literature meet at Smoky Thea Tower, where his fame shot towards the sky. Princess Zhao Yu felt like her heart was drowning in honey. But this joy only lasted for a few days, for the 3-pronged scheme to destroy Ling Zhao and the Ling family was revealed, with her father actually being the mastermind behind it. This was followed by the Winds of Change, where Ling Zhao's army was surrounded and in grave danger. Ling Tian rushing 1,000 miles out to rescue him, charging straight into the army, willfully slaughtering and earning himself the reputation of an Azura. Back in Skybearing, Ling Qian and Ming Li Zhao devised a strategy to take down the Long and Yang families, turning the tables around to the perpetrators and causing Skybearing to have a change in regime. After Long Xiang lost the battle, he was put under house arrest in the Ling family, and he lost his sanity, becoming a lunatic. Her own father forgot favors and tried to violate justice by plotting against her own husband's family. This shattered the beautiful fantasy dream she was living in. How could a little girl in her youth bear so much tragedy? Before she could settle the relationship matters, while Zhao Yu was still at a loss, along came the news of Ling Tian being pursued by the #1 expert of the pugilistic world, Justice, and had fled for over 1,000 miles. Zhao Yu's heart immediately came round, throwing aside the tiny bit of hatred she had, and she wholly worried about Ling Tian, praying, even having nightmares, with a depressed expression daily. This was exacerbated when the Yu family, one of the 2 largest aristocratic families, brought people to propose a marriage, with the Ling family agreeing. Zhao Yu, who had no one left to rely on, almost fell into absolute despair. With setbacks one after another, Zhao Yu finally fell ill. Because old Madame Ling had always looked fondly upon her, she had personally cared for her illness, and Zhao Yu had voiced out that she would like to move to Ling Tian's personal courtyard to tend to her illness. How can old Madame Ling not see her intentions? Pitying her infatuation, as well as knowing that Ling Tian would probably not head to his tiny yard the moment he came back, she agreed. Chapter 552, Returning Home. As such, Zhao Yu immediately moved into Ling Tian's yard. Even if she couldn't see him and dearly missed him, His lingering smell in the room could help ease her longing. Every table and stool, every grass or wood would all have Ling Tian's traces on them. When Zhao Yu slept at night, she would even use the blanket that Ling Tian had covered himself with, and there would be Ling Tian's lingering manly aura on the blanket. Every night, Zhao Yu would even shyly feel that she was sharing the same bed with her beloved husband. Thus, every time it was night and before she fell asleep, even if she was alone in the room, Zhao Yu would be filled with embarrassment whenever she took off her clothes. A broken bar. It was late into the night, but Zhao Yu was still muttering under her breath. Her eyes were in a dreamy state and her face was slightly pinkish. On top of the desk, the candle would occasionally flicker in the wind. Finally, Zhao Yu let out a yawn and stretched lazily. Standing up, she turned around with a gentle motion and looking at the blanket on top of the bed, her face turned red and she said softly, "Little brother Tian, your elder sister is going to hug you to sleep." Outside the window, Ling Tian felt his heart shake. When he was still about 3 or 4, he would frequently stay the night at the palace and Zhao Yu would frequently stay in the Ling residence. Every time, she had to hug Ling Tian until he went to sleep, otherwise he would start whining and sobbing. At the same time, the Ling family was also happy to let the two of them stay together, so they did not need to make a separate sleeping arrangement. Before they slept, Zhao Yu would have a victory smile on her face as she said, "Little brother Tian, your elder sister is going to hug you to sleep." At that time, Ling Tian naturally did not know whether to laugh or cry. With the soul of a 20-year-old man, he was held by a little girl to go to sleep. But after more than 10 years, hearing these same words shook Ling Tian's heart. Looking at Zhao Yu undressing before she got into bed, Ling Tian sighed in his heart and turned his head around with his heart in a complete mess. Just what should he do? If he didn't want her, Zhao Yu would definitely be ruined for life. But if he accepted her a broken bar, Ling Tian didn't feel that it was appropriate in his heart. After all, Ling Tian was the one who personally caused Long Xiang's craziness. This was the enmity of him destroying her father a broken bar. He first made her father crazy before taking over all of his territory and then would carry his daughter into the nuptial chamber. Ling Tian could not help but curse himself for being evil. Just what was this? He could not help but give a spit of disgust. From the room, Zhao Yu's flustered voice could suddenly be heard. Who's outside? Is it little brother Tian who is back?" Ling Tian was startled, afraid that he would be spotted if she came out. He quickly sprinted away. With a creaking sound, Zhao Yu's maid walked out warily with a lantern. After looking around and seeing that there wasn't anyone in the surroundings, she eased the door closed. What Ling Tian did not know was that this wasn't the first time that Zhao Yu was overly suspicious. How would Zhao Yu, who didn't know a thing about martial arts, be able to spot Ling Tian's light movements? It was no more than a coincidence. Ling Tian then tiptoed his way to his mother's door. The room was still lit and the sound of pages flipping could be heard. It seemed like his mother was still looking through the accounts. But what kind of accounts would require his mother to look through them late at night? Ling Tian knocked onto the door with doubts in his heart. From inside, Chu Tinger's voice filled with alertness could be heard. "Who's outside?" Ling Tian replied softly, "Mother, it is me." "Tanner is back." The room fell into silence. After almost half a year, she finally heard her son's voice. In a state of extreme ecstasy, Chu Tinger had actually gone into a daze. After a moment later, Ling Tian heard the sounds of flurried footsteps followed by the door being swung open violently. Just when Ling Tian was about to walk into the room, his ear was twisted by his mother's jade hand and he felt 2 dull kicks on his behind. "You little B Street Road, how can you run away without letting me know? You left for a few months and did not even bother sending me any news. You a broken bar, you are going to anger me to death. You little B Street Road, I will smack you until a flower blooms from your ass." Ling Tian did not dare to struggle as he cried out in pain, "Mother, a broken bar, see a broken bar, not so hard, a broken bar. You still know what pain is?" Chu Tinger used even more strength and tears suddenly rolled down from her cheeks. "You little B Street Road, you ran away without saying a thing and were chased by the #1 expert in the world. Do you know how worried your mother was? I couldn't even get a good night's sleep. You a broken bar, you unfilial little beast. When will you be able to let me worry less?" She then could not help but smack Ling Tian on the behind another 2 more times. However, she did not use the slightest bit on strength this time and Ling Tian even wondered if the dust on his behind was swept off or not. Ling Tian pretended that it hurt badly and pleaded for mercy. A long while later, Chu Tinger finally calmed down and carefully inspected her son. After going out for a full 4 months, her son did not turn tan or skinny, but his skin was instead glowing and he seemed to have grown taller. She was then at ease as she wept tears of joy. At this moment, Ling Tian was like an obedient baby, sitting on the spot upright and allowing his mother to check whatever she wanted. He was naturally not afraid of his mother realizing anything. After his previous transformation, his body was fitter than before and his skin was silky to the point the lady would be envious of it. Even all of the scars on his body had disappeared and he was like a hard-boiled egg with its shell being peeled off. Even if Chu Tinger had microscopic vision, she wouldn't be able to find anything. Weren't you being chased? Why does it seem like you were out for a makeover? You were actually chased to the point you became beautiful? Chu Tinger looked at her son with doubt. She heard that the one chasing after Ling Tian was the #1 expert in the world. But why did it seem as though her son was in an even better state than being at home? Mother, don't worry. The martial arts of that fellow weren't up to mark and this child went out for a spin with him like I was playing with a child. Ling Tian wouldn't dare to let her mother know how frightening that justice was lest she would be worried about him. He then said cheekily, however, this child is already a grown man and you use the wrong adjectives. You should be describing me as suave and elegant, bold and vigorous. Don't ever say that I am beautiful again. A broken bar hair, broken bar mother. You are the one becoming more and more beautiful. If the two of us were to walk on the streets, the others would definitely think that you are my younger sister. Glib tongue. You dare to joke with your mother like this? You truly have guts. Chu Tinger laughingly reprimanded Ling Tian. Why did you return at such a time? Couldn't you wait until the sun is up? Ling Tian said with a bitter expression. The problem is that I do not want others to know that I am back. This is a military plan. He a broken bar. Chu Tinger glared at her son with both doting and anger in her eyes. Then you should let your grandfather and grandmother know that you are back at the very least. Do you know how much they miss you? In the few months that you were gone, your grandmother's hair has almost all turned white. You heartless brat, Ling Tian hurriedly promised. Of course, I will go and pay my respects to grandmother after this. The two of them then began to chat for a short while. While Chu Tinger could not bear to let Ling Tian go, she also knew that he needed to pay his respects to old Madame Ling. Now that her son was back home, the worry in her heart was finally gone and she felt a wave of tiredness. Ling Tian then helped his mother to the bed gently and before he left, Chu Tinger said with a sigh, when you have time, go and visit your aunt and Zhao Yu. Your aunt is also worried about you. However, she has not fully recovered from her grief and is currently pregnant. You must watch your words when you visit her. Ling Tian hurriedly agreed and after a short hesitation, Chu Tinger said, Tanner, regardless of what enmity exists between both our families, everything is over already. Our Ling family was not harmed in the slightest and Long Xiang'an broken bar is the mastermind of the whole affair. He already received the punishment he deserved. The Long family will no longer have the chance to fight for power again. It is best for you to show mercy at times and you should consider the matter carefully. A broken bar. Ling Tian was completely puzzled and asked, Mother, what are you talking about? After talking in such a big circle, I still don't understand what you are trying to say. She glared at her son with anger and said, I am referring to your cousin, Zhao Yu. I watched her grow up and understand her personality very well. On top of that, she is infatuated with you and she is also your fiancé in name. If you can, I hope that you will treat her better. Do not have any prejudice against her because of that B Street Road Emperor. These few months, Chu Tinger could naturally see how much Zhao Yu missed Ling Tian. No matter what, Zhao Yu was someone who Chu Tinger watched grow up. Now that Ling Tian was back, she had to remind him about it. Ling Tian rubbed his head and said with frustration, Mother, I remember that you have always been opposed to polygamy. Why do you wish for your son to have more wives now? Nonsense. Preventing polygamy is your father's treatment. Chu Tinger flared up. As for my son, as long as you can handle it, your mother will find the silver for you even if you want to have 10,000 wives. Ling Tian broke out in a sweat. It turns out that her standards would change depending on the person. His mother's ferocity made Ling Tian pity his father in his heart. How pitiful. Just when Ling Tian was about to go out, Chu Tinger suddenly thought about something and whispered mysteriously into his ears, That last Zhao Yu isn't too bad. Not only is she beautiful, she has large breasts and wide hips. She will definitely be a good candidate to bear children." Ling Tian was dumbfounded. When he returned to the Ling family courtyard, it was already past midnight. His experience from a single night made Ling Tian stimulated, attacked, harmed, trampled a broken bar. His red ears were naturally the doing of his mother. The few canes that he suffered on the behind was naturally by old Madame Ling. As for the few bumps on his head, it was naturally his grandfather's way of doting on him a broken bar. As he sprinted back to the courtyard, Ling Tian sighed along the way. There isn't much time left. This young noble still intends to talk about life goals with Ling Tian. My grandparents and parents are all getting eager to hug a grandson a broken bar. Chapter 553, Yanzu in Fright. Steadily and silently, Ling Tian flipped himself through the window into the room. Inside, Ling Tian had already warily opened her eyes as she sat up. "Who is it?" In a weird voice, Ling Tian cackled, "Little beautiful, it's me. I'm the serial flower thief, here to pick your beautiful flower one. You had better not resist." Like a hungry tiger pouncing on its food, he immediately pinned this felt body below his own, his two hands moving naturally on instinct to attack the defenses, conquering the land until he reached the highest twin peaks. Ling Tian let out a yelp. She had already recognized Ling Tian's voice a long time ago, and was overjoyed yet embarrassed, so how could she retaliate? Following Ling Tian's ever-brazen reactions, Ling Tian could only begin to moan as her body melted into Ling Tian's embrace. She opened her mouth with difficulty, as though wanting to say something, but Ling Tian was prepared and immediately sealed her tiny mouth with his. It was as though her brain got short-circuited, her entire self lost within the passionate kiss of her lover who she had not seen for a long time. Ling Tian's hands did not stop moving though, removing all the articles of clothing with a practiced hand, and the moment Ling Tian recovered her senses, she found out that her body was without a single thread, and under the demonic grip of her loved one, it was already trembling non-stop a broken bar. Striving to keep her amorous eyes open, she held on to the offending hand that was currently around her chest, and pouted with a red face. "Young noble is too hasty. A broken bar. Sister Yan is still by the side, and this is a really inconvenient time. A broken bar." Ling Tian received a shock, and his busy hand suddenly froze as he stretched his head out for a look. On the other side of the bed was precisely Yu Bingyan, who was deep in sleep with slow breaths. A broken bar. As though she was not disturbed by Ling Tian's arrival. A broken bar. Ling Tian's face turned bitter. "My good Chinner, via broken bar for 4 months now." A broken bar. Ling Tian could only nestle embarrassedly on his chest as she whispered, "How about a broken bar? We go to your room." In great joy, Ling Tian gave her ample chest a vigorous rub, before lowering his head and latching onto her lips as he mumbled, "This lady Ling Chen is indeed an agreeable person. Looks like this flower thief today will definitely get to pick your flower. My luck with women is indeed not a shallow one." Hehe. A broken bar. Ling Chen could only let out a lovable moan as she gripped tightly on Ling Tian, breathing heavily as she replied, "Young nobly broken bar." Ling Chen has always belonged to young nobly broken bar. Since you want to pick my flower, then you can pick it however you want. A broken bar. Chinner also wants a broken bar. Young nobly broken bar. This sentence was like a potent aphrodisiac, for Ling Tian immediately felt the blood in his entire blood rage, and he grunted, "Then I'll not be courteous for today. A broken bar." Ling Chen's face turned redder, and her arms circled around his neck as she closed her eyes and moaned, "A broken bar. Up to you." With a low laugh, Ling Tian exerted some strength to carry Ling Chen, and vanished in another instant. On the bed, Yu Bingyan's lashes suddenly trembled, as though wanting to open, and her face immediately started to turn a brilliant shade of red. What was she dreaming about? However, she suddenly flipped, and pulled the blanket over her head. A broken bar. It seems like this lass was actually dishonest about sleeping soundly. A broken bar. Only late the next morning did our great noble Ling walk out of his room feeling extremely refreshed. He squinted his eyes towards the sun, comfortably stretching out his waist as he let out a brilliant smile. After living 4 months like a celibate, Ling Tian, as well as little Ling Tian, felt almost stifled to death. Last night, regardless of Ling Tian's protests and pleas, Ling Tian had wantonly ravaged her repeatedly, with the result being Ling Tian was still dead asleep on the bed even with such a profound cultivation, her body completely bereft of energy. Recalling Ling Tian's bashful fawning yesterday, Ling Tian suddenly felt his little brother jump up in excitement once again, and almost could not resist the temptation to return back to the room and begin another round immediately. He quickly breathed deeply, suppressing the heat in his abdomen. He found it depressing how his lust was raging more and more out of control in the recent times. In the past, there used to be such occurrences, but so long as he practiced the reverse suitor for his divine shocking dragon formula, then he could calm his emotions down. However, he found out that even if he could suppress and like so, the next flare-up would be far more intense. He could only smile wryly to himself. If this were to go on, then his rule of having one wife would definitely be impossible. This was because one woman right now was definitely unable to take his vigorous stamina and strength. Just look at Ling Tian's situation. A day or two might seem possible, but a long period of time would only harm her body, and even with Ling Tian's strength and constitution, she still could not take it, let alone others. Luckily I've transmigrated to another life, Ling Tian resentfully thought. If it was the past him, he would only be able to marry one wife, and most likely, there would be no woman who would be able to endure this stamina, likely making him end up as a bachelor. It was better for him to have transmigrated. Ling Tian's sensitive hearing next picked up a group of footsteps walking past. One pair hurried by, followed by another, then a next, as though they could not stand still. Nobody knew why there was now a cordoned-off courtyard beside the secret chamber, but nobody raised any issues, as though it was a common occurrence. From afar came two other rushing over, and their conversation traveled into Ling Tian's ears. "Old Tai, I heard that the new god of wealth is not a simple character at all. Are you sure your side is fine? I just saw old Tian and the rest walking out with an expression as though their mother just died. They must have been criticized the whole time, ha ha ha, how satisfying." A voice full of schadenfreude sounded. Who knows? Another helpless voice sounded. "You really have it easy, just requiring you to check out how many blades are freshly produced every day, write a few strokes on the accounts and that's it." I'm in big trouble, being the supervisor for one side of revenue and grain supply. The nitty-gritty details can already destroy me, and I'm hoping that this god of wealth will go easy on me. Hey, you won't get into trouble. Who doesn't know that you, old Tai, have always done things in a meticulous manner? Relax, you should be fine. Though the words sounded like reassurance, the tone of the voice was as though the person was awaiting a good show. "FK your mom. You want to see me make a fool of myself? Dream on." The other guy ruthlessly cursed. Their voices grew fainter, and the first person seemed to have said something, followed by huge roars of laughter before they entered the secret chamber. Ling Tian finally realized that Yanzu had finally started her job as the new financial controller. It seemed like those helpers in charge of running their businesses for him were in for some trouble. As the saying went, the new boss cracks the whip 3 times too, and our dear Miss Zhao had only cracked her whip once so far. Ling Tian pursed up his mouth as he thought, this girl really acts fast. He had to admit that this sort of swift and decisive reaction was something he admired. However, this could also be attributed to the fact that Yanzu had left her post for quite an extended period, which made her hands a little itchy. Right now, after assuming her old trade, she would definitely be full of vigor, and with this being the foundation of her loved one Ling Tian, Yanzu would definitely show more effort. But if that was the case, then this group of supervisors were in for a treat. Yanzu's profession could not be hidden, and was not inferior in any aspect to his own mother, with some parts even surpassing her. While the supervisors mentioned about tidying up the accounts beforehand, with some even better than the accountants themselves, there were still quite a few uneducated people who were placed in charge as the business expanded. Thus, Ling Tian could be sure that quite a few of them would walk out with swollen faces. Oh, a good example would be that old Tai that just went in a broken bar. Only by passing through Yanzu's reorganization could the messy finances of the Ling family courtyard become stable and official. Ling Tian could imagine the type of foundation he was setting up, that what sort of huge benefits he could reap after the huge amount of finances, grain and military supplies went through Yanzu's magical hands. What Ling Tian was unaware of was that ever since he set down this command, Yanzu, who was seated in the secret chamber, had almost been frightened out of her wits. Never in her dreams did she imagine that Ling Tian's strength had already grown to such a frightening state in the dark. Even she, who was used to huge sums of money, was still overwhelmed with shock at the accounts. The preparations made in all four directions by the Ling family courtyard was just on the surface. The fully compiled report made Yanzu totally dumbfounded, unable to imagine that Ling Tian's subordinates can actually have such an efficient and fast method to gather resources, already outstripping even the families by more than half. However, what made her the most confused was that even with the crazy accumulation of wealth, as well as the immense project that was ongoing, there was actually no proper system of doing things, as well as an extraordinarily messy accounting. In her eyes, it was as though a swarm of bees were doing work. They did not even separate the revenues from the expenditure, placing them together, and as for splitting by departments, don't even go there. Yansu always thought that in order to rake in wealth, one had to have a huge brain behind everything, as well as many talents working together to create this miracle. She could not fathom just how Ling Tian had managed to rely on these riffraffs to create such a huge family property. Furthermore, she had merely skimmed through the surface. The more frightening part was that within all the messy accounts, revenue and expenses, there was actually no signs of embezzlement present. Even with the influence of the Zhao family, as well as the various talents under them, coupled with Yanzu's talent, they too found it hard to prevent any form of embezzlement. Yanzu was sure that embezzlement of funds was something impossible to prevent, and so long as it wasn't too obvious, they could let it slip. However, for Ling Tian's subordinates, such messy accounting was as good as a God-sent opportunity for them to get filthy rich, and yet, there was no such incidents happening. This was something impossible. Chapter 554, Decisive Battle Begins. For such a scenario, if Yanzu were to actually question Ling Tian, he probably would not be able to answer either. In real life, achieving such wealth through official channels wasn't actually possible. If Yanzu found out that the most infamous bandit groups within Heavenly Star all belonged to this young noble Ling, then she wouldn't be so surprised anymore. As for saying that nobody was corrupt, what was supposed to be an impossibility could also become a possibility if you were like Ling Tian, instilling all sorts of loyalist mentality into them since they were young. Just look at Ling Jian, Ling K, Ling 20, Xi Mansa, and the rest, and nobody would find it astonishing, with this group of cold-blooded killers staring like loyal tigers at the Ling family's businesses. Even if one person wanted to stuff their pockets, they would also need to reconsider if their heads were rooted and steady. Everyone present was clear on Ling Tian's ruthless methods, as well as his strictness towards his subordinates. Nobody dared to commit the heavenly crime of going against his authority. In actuality, the humongous funds inside the Ling family courtyard not only came from their scattered businesses such as hotels and gambling dens all over the continent, but a large portion was also obtained through robbing. This sort of a business had no startup cost and was naturally more profitable since all income was pure profit. This was to the point that under the urging of the insatiable Ling Jian, they had repeatedly practiced their operations, achieving a large and unimaginable bounty. What was meant by a practice was actually auctioning off the items that they had stolen, then after collecting the money, stealing them again so they could sell them off once more a broken bar. Naturally, this sort of behavior was quickly halted by Ling Tian, or else that bar stands a broken bar. No, it should be boss Ling Tian's. Number 2 man would probably have created something unspeakable in the future, a broken bar. Under this sort of frightening speed in collecting funds, the financial resources under Ling Tian naturally ballooned up like a ball being inflated. Every day there would be a few bandits dressed up as businessmen bringing in a few carriages worth of loot. A broken bar. Naturally, under this sort of speed, even if you were a serious professional, you would need to work night and day to barely sort things out. If a group of old men was tasked to account for these things in the warehouse, it would definitely end up as a mess, and the accounts would be in a similar mess. Even though Chutinger had sent thousands of professionals over to maintain the foundation and integrity of the business, and was still sending over large numbers of personnel each year, compared to the needs of the Ling family courtyard, it was as good as pouring a cup of water onto a cart of burning firewood. This was especially so for the large expansion the Ling family courtyard was undergoing, as well as their conduct of inhaling large amounts of military supplies and food. It practically multiplied year after year, causing the place to be severely understaffed. A bunch of uneducated old men had to unwillingly begin to take up this complicated work. A broken bar. Ling Tian naturally knew that with his meager influence at the start as well as his family's superficial foundations, he could not actually fight against the huge Zhao family. Going through proper channels to amass money would be considered a fool's dream. The moment the Ling family courtyard was built, he sent out all the blood iron warriors to make money. All dynasties in the world had amassed money that was reeking in blood, and even for Ling Tian, who had 2 lifetimes of experience, it was no different to broken bar. This was also why Ling Tian had practically excavated the entire Mount Victory to turn it into several hundred large storerooms or broken bar. When Yanzu first understood the nature of Ling Tian's business, other than fright and shock, she also felt panic and could not believe it. She found it utterly unbelievable to think that Ling Tian's concrete details would be so frightening, so atrocious. Grandpa, you were right in your judgment about Ling Tian, but why did you not follow through? The Zhao family will face this huge hoodlum soon enough, and maybe even the #1 financial magnate in the entire continent will vanish into smoke. While she had long considered herself as Ling Tian's woman, but upon understanding his financial ability and internal information, she could not help but worry for her family. She was extremely clear that this involved not only financial ability but also military affairs. If that was the case, then how strong was his military force? And what about his intelligence force, which had never been revealed yet? She did not even dare to continue pondering. Not out of Ling Tian's expectations. Only an hour had passed when he heard the same old tie shuffle past and ejection, while mumbling dispiritedly to himself. After Yanzu had looked at his accounts, she had immediately thrown them into a corner before lecturing him ruthlessly and commanding him to alter this and that, and had even set a time limit for him. For someone who only knew how to use his fists, having a sword chop off his head would be better. No wonder that the 5 huge men that walked out previously looked as though they were holding a funeral. A broken bar. Ling Tian, however, would naturally not care about such things. He only set down an order, that all finance-related matters would be taken over by Yanzu, and everyone needed to comply without questions. If there were violations, they would be taken care of using martial law. It was precisely because of this order that left the bunch of lawless men all screaming in misery. Where was their justice? To let them plunder, kill, conquer lands, that wasn't a problem, but these little scribbles on the accounting books were difficult beyond belief. Furthermore, their thick fingers, which were akin to carrots, could not even hold the slender brush properly, let alone write. From behind him, the door softly creaked open, and when he turned around, Ling Tian saw Ling Chen slightly frowning as she bashfully bit her lips, standing red-faced by the entrance of the door. After the extreme joy she went through last night, the Ling Chen who was completely bereft of strength revealed her most resplendent charm, much like a Chinese crab apple slowly blossoming, full of grace and maturity. The glance Ling Tian casually gave made him stand stock still, and little Ling Tian leapt up at this time, signaling his intention to continue his expedition. As though sensing his fiery gaze, Ling Chen rolled her eyes at him, half in joy and half in annoyance, her face turning scarlet. A satisfied feeling rose from the depths of Ling Tian's heart. Knowing full well that his lover could not take much more, he suppressed little Ling Tian, and was about to speak, but was interrupted by 2 people flying from different directions. The figure in white had with black hair cascading like a waterfall, her figure graceful like the willow, while the other was dressed in black, straight as a sword, his eyes shooting out ice-cold killing intent. Both sides clashed with their gazes in midair, and it was as though 2 swords just clashed and created sparks. Li Zhu, Ling Jian. The 2 of them were finally here. Ling Tian saw how Ling Jian's hands held a small bag, and a weird expression appeared on his face. If he was not wrong, That should be the Chinese gold thread one that Ling Tian went to painstaking lengths to search for. The two of them stared at Ling Tian together, their eyes shooting out strong battle intent. Ling Tian turned to look at Li Zhu, shooting out a cold smile as he said, "For today's battle, I just ask for it to be satisfying." As he spoke, he threw out his hand, and the bag landed and opened, showing over a dozen big and small gold threads. Ling Tian smiled coldly and in an arrogant manner, "This will be our bet. Whoever loses will have to boil these gold threads in water and drink 9 bowls consecutively." Ling Tian crowed. Looking at Li Zhu, he seemed to already imagine that hateful woman pinching her nose and drinking bowl after bowl. This filled him with unprecedented glee. Ling Tian sighed as he looked at Ling Tian. "Tian, won't you reconsider? Fighting with a woman, is it glorious even if you win? And how many gold threads are there? Can you really bear to force them down her throat?" His eyes were directed towards Ling Tian, yet he was already sending meaningful glances towards Li Zhu, telling her that since she had tortured Ling Tian throughout their entire journey back, shouldn't she show mercy this time around? Ling Tian nodded his head as he resentfully spat, "Young noble, it's not that I'm bullying the weak. You don't know about this, but the amount of gold thread I ate throughout the journey back can be compared to all these here. She actually took advantage of my precarious position, so how can I not return this favor?" Li Zhu's face seemed to be a little nervous as she said, "Tian, you seem to have prepared a few too many gold threads. Why don't we reduce the amount by half?" Seeing this, Ling Tian found it unexpected. What was going on with this great demoness today, that she suddenly would show such kindness? She seems to really be showing me a lot of face. Half is not too bad, let me help and see how much more I can reduce for Ling Tian. He added on immediately, "Yes, it's indeed too much, even half is too much. How about a broken bar 1/5? Maybe 1/10 would do too." Ling Tian bowed as he replied, "Young noble, I know you have protective feelings for the fairer sex, but do you know how vicious this Miss Li was, how much she tortured me along the way?" Turning his head, he icily stared at her as he hissed, "Now you're scared? What did you do in the past? Didn't you think of this when you tortured me in the past?" Ling Tian stared, a little dumbfounded. How can I not know Li Zhu's frightening ability? I should be asking if you understand how truly frightening she is instead. How could this lass ever be kind? This is just basically pushing you towards a trap full of spikes for you to fall into. People are pushing you in, yet you are not trying to fight back or dodge, and instead go with the momentum and jump into the trap. Are you a fool? The originally worried face of Li Zhu suddenly took a 180-degree change as she exclaimed, "Young noble Ling, see, I was trying to help him by giving him a chance, but he doesn't want to accept it. I have no choice, do I?" Ling Tian only rolled his eyes at her. Others might not know, but how could he not be aware of her methods? Wasn't this the archetype of a conveniently obedient person? Li Zhu followed closely with another sentence, "Tian, are you prepared?" Ling Tian only straightened and snorted deeply, retorting, "Miss Li, are you prepared to drink the gold thread water?" Chapter 555, Sufficient Preparation. Ling Tian, who was by the door, walked to Ling Tian slowly and leaned on his shoulder. Looking at both Ling Tian and Li Zhu, she could not help but chuckle and said softly, "Young noble, since everything has been prepared, you should give the order." Tian has always looked down on ladies, and after losing to me previously, he remains unresigned in his heart up until now. It would also be a good thing for Sister Li Zhu to show him her prowess. She can show him what it means for there to always be someone more powerful than him. The second half of her words were said to Li Zhu. Li Zhu broke out into a bright smile, and she intentionally swept her gaze past Ling Tian's face before saying confidently, "Younger sister Ling Tian, I will definitely make you satisfied today." A while later, I will show this master assassin how a pig head is created. Master Assassin Ling, First Pavilion Master, it seems like you are already addicted to drinking gold thread water. Broken bar. Ling Tian replied with a smirk, "It is still undecided just who will be the one drinking the gold thread water. What is the point of bragging at this moment?" Following that he shouted, "Men!" Following which, Ling K, Ling Lei and Ling Dian entered together carrying a large tub of water, dried leaves, and 9 huge bowls. The 3 of them gave a respectful bow to Ling Tian before busily getting to work. Their actions were extremely well coordinated and they must have practiced before this for sure. It seems like Ling Tian was truly well prepared. Not only did he prepare the gold thread, he even called 3 of his brothers over as witnesses. In just a short few moments, a large stove was set up in the corner of the yard and a metal pot hung over it. Following that, a large bucket of water was poured into it and Ling Tian delightedly threw in a large packet of gold thread. Ling Tian could not help but be stunned as he burst out laughing. "Tian, you are truly well prepared. Regardless of who the victor is, I will be greeted with a good show." Haha, a broken bar. Ling Tian remained calm and replied respectfully, "Young noble has taught Ling Tian that I must definitely make sufficient preparations before taking action." Ling Tian laughed to the point he could barely breathe. "All right, you indeed lived up to my teachings and your preparatory work is truly sufficient. Since both of you refuse to back down and so much preparation has already been made, I am also willing to witness a good show." Li Zu looked at the metal pot with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. She then looked at Ling Tian calmly without an expression. Ling Tian cupped his fists and the delighted expression of being able to take his vengeance could be seen. "May young noble give the order and allow us to battle." Ling Tian exchanged gazes with Ling Tian and Li Zu before replying, "Since the 2 of you insists on fighting, then the 2 of you shall fight here and now." Ling K, raise the fire. The time taken for the water to boil won't be the time limit of your fight. Since the 2 of you are going to fight, there must be a few rules. Number 1, you are not allowed to leave this yard. Number 2, you are not allowed to affect the fire. Number 3, I allow both of you to go all out. Injuries are fine but death is forbidden. Ling Tian looked at the 2 of them and said slowly. These 3 conditions were extremely loose. Regardless of whether it was Li Zu or Ling Tian, they would both aim to kill the moment they took action. Furthermore, Ling Tian had the advantage in this aspect. If his killing moves were restricted, Ling Tian's battle prowess would be largely restricted and it definitely wouldn't be fair. Thus, Ling Tian decided to let them go all out. As for the second rule, it was actually biased towards Ling Tian. With Li Zu's divine ice formula, she could easily freeze the flames and the water of the pot would never boil. Of course, this was something that Ling Tian would never know. A violent glow exploded forth from Ling Tian's eyes and he looked at Ling Tian with gratitude before taking a few steps back. Ling Tian's expression was solemn and with every step he took, it was as though there was a mountain resting on his shoulders becoming heavier and heavier. The black robes that he was wearing fluttered like there was a wind and after 7 steps, Ling Tian's clothes fluttered like he was standing on a mountain peak. At this moment, the whole yard was filled with silence and even the trees in the distance were completely motionless. This form of extreme silence was extremely strange. With just the momentum of walking backward, Ling Tian was able to accumulate his oar to the peak. At this moment, Ling Tian was like the boundless ocean, steady and impenetrable. Looking at Ling Tian's fluttering clothes and hair despite the lack of wind, a look of praise could be seen in Ling Tian's eyes. Even Ling Tian didn't expect that Ling Tian's improvement was so huge. It was truly out of his expectations. However, broken bar. Ling Tian said something well. There was always someone stronger. Li Zu chuckled and seemed to be completely unaffected by the huge pressure that Ling Tian was emanating. She then took a few casual steps back and the distance between the 2 of them widened to 50 feet. As she looked at Ling Tian in the eye, her white robes were completely still. The powerful pressure and violent wind stirred up by Ling Tian's inner chi seemed to be completely neutralized when it was in front of Li Zu. Li Zu still had a leisurely expression as though she did not do anything at all. Facing Ling Tian who had unleashed his aura, she undoubtedly had the upper hand. Ling K, Ling Lei, and Ling Tian could naturally understand the phenomenon before their eyes and could not help but be shocked. Despite their confidence in Ling Tian, they were inevitably worried for him. It seems like Brother Jian's opponent was extremely powerful. At this moment, Ling Tian let out an order. Raise the fire. Without any hesitation, Ling Kai lit up the dry wood and leaves under the pot and the boiling heat filled the yard. With a clanging sound, Ling Tian drew his sword. However, there was something extremely strange about his actions. Before his sword had fully left its sheath, the sky was filled with the sound of his treasured sword leaving its sheath. The moment Ling Tian stretched his arms out, It was as though there were countless swords leaving their sheaths at the same moment. Before his sword left its sheath, the powerful sword chi had already enveloped the whole yard. Li Zu took in a deep breath and her expression remained the same. However, the leisurely look in her eyes was replaced by one of seriousness. Although she did not make a single move, the impression which she gave off was one that she had already moved. It was as though her snow-white figure was levitating in midair, with her cold gaze being locked onto Ling Tian. The moment Ling Tian drew his sword, he successfully climbed out from his disadvantage, and the sound of countless swords being drawn sliced through Li Zu's inner chi, which was locked onto him. From this moment, victory and defeat were difficult to predict. Ling Ke, Ling Lei, and Ling Dian heaved a sigh of relief together. Their brother Jian was truly magnificent. As long as he had a sword in his hand, he would be the Azura. How would a lass be able to block such an aura? In their eyes, since their brother Jian was no longer at the disadvantage, victory would definitely belong to him. Ling Tian felt Ling Chen's soft palm holding onto his hand and a nervous voice in his ears. "Young noble, who do you think will emerge victorious?" Both Li Zu and Ling Jian's cultivation weren't below Ling Chen's, and she couldn't accurately point out who had the upper hand. With his eagle eyes, Ling Tian studied every little action of the two and said in a soft voice, "Jian's improvement over the past few months is truly stunning and beyond my expectations. However, that would be depending on who he is compared against." From the start of the battle, Li Zu had the upper hand in the competition of their auras. Despite Ling Jian wiping out his disadvantage by drawing his sword, he had already lost the initiative. Ling Chen whispered, "Does young noble think that Jian will lose?" Ling Tian smiled. This would depend on Ling Jian's confidence and willpower. The larger his confidence and willpower, the harder he would fall. If Ling Jian was not so confident and eager of his victory before the start of the battle, things would be easier for him instead. However, Jian is currently on the passive side. If not, with his current strength, it wouldn't be easy for Li Zu to attain victory, and it would be extremely difficult for her to do so before the water boils. Ling Chen replied with a nao and fell into thought. With a flash of the white light, Ling Jian's sword was finally out of its sheath and a brilliant splendor emanated from it. Before his sword was fully out of its sheath, it let out a heaven-shaking commotion as though there were 10,000 horses galloping through the grasslands. But at the actual moment when the sword left its sheath, it was completely silent. This was an extreme change. Ling Tian gasped, "Ling Jian's talents truly leave me in admiration. However, it is truly a pity. If he is able to take another step, he would be comparable to Li Zu and the outcome wouldn't be his miserable defeat. It is a pity that he is still missing a single step." Ling Chen was stunned. If he is only missing a single step, there shouldn't be a huge gap between them, right? Is he truly unable to escape from the plight of a miserable defeat? Ling Tian smiled, "Chinner, you can be considered a martial arts grandmaster as well. Why are you making such an amateurish remark? Don't you know the logic of the difference of a single centimeter can seem like 1,000 miles? In terms of cultivation, confidence, and strength, Ling Jian wouldn't be too far away from Li Zu. However, there is still a gap between the two of their realms. If this was before Jian went to Northern Wei, there wouldn't be a need for this competition at all. However, even with a huge improvement to his strength, Ling Jian is still lacking in his realm. Thus, Ling Jian is sure to lose. Li Zu's eyes narrowed and her right foot took half a step forward. With her skinny figure leaning forward slightly, Ling Jian suddenly felt an immense increase in pressure and the dirt on the ground was stirred up. The dirt and dust on the ground then rushed towards Ling Jian like the waves striking a beach, as though there was a commander leading it. Ling Chen praised, "This technique of elder sister Li Zu is truly beautiful. I surely wouldn't be able to achieve this." Ling Jian's long sword slashed down and he struck an empty spot with a lightning-fast motion without the slightest bit of wind. While this sword was as fast as lightning, it had a mysterious phenomenon in the eyes of everyone else present. The others present witnessed an extremely strange sight. The long sword was initially lifted up above Ling Jian's head, and this was already extremely strange in the face of an enemy. This slashing motion of Ling Jian had started from above his head, and everyone could actually clearly see how the slashing motion was broken down into a few parts. Slashing down from the top of his head was the first action. Falling further was another action. His sword elegantly descending to the height of his shoulders with the tip of his sword pointed out was the last. On the ground, The dust and dirt beneath him also formed a half-foot wave and rolled forward in both a speedy and gentle manner. The moment Ling Tian's wave of dust rolled forward, Ling Tian frowned and shook his head slightly before letting out a soft sigh. Chapter 556, Li Zu's Scheme. Everyone could see how Ling Tian's robes moved within the path together with his every move during these 3 moves. It was something that could only be observed in super slow motion, yet the truth was that Ling Tian was extremely quick. Ling Tian narrowed his eyes, softly gasping. If Ling Tian had managed to add in another move while his shoulders were in line with the sword point, then he had a fighting chance to claim victory, and even if he lost, it would have been a close victory for Li Zu. However, pulling down the sword simply shows that his current standard was far from it. This reflected Ling Tian's current comprehension of his strength in the fact that he had yet to reach the realm. On the ground, the 2 rows of rolling dirt suddenly rose up together, and sluggishly formed into 2 separate sandstorm pillars, diverging into 2 different directions. One flew directly past Ling Tian, shooting forward for about 60 feet before softly landing on the corner of the little courtyard, collapsing back to a pile of dirt. The other zipped past Li Zu's body, landing on the opposite corner, but it slammed onto the ground with a loud "dehong" sound. In terms of control, Ling Tian was obviously inferior by a notch. Following the path of the 2 sandstorm pillars, the entire courtyard suddenly became spick and span as though 100 men had carried brooms and dustpans and swept up the entire place. Most likely, even if Ling Tian were to take his white robes and throw them on the ground, there would probably not be any dust that would stick on it. Just at the point when the 2 dirt dragons split off from each other, Li Zu and Ling Tian had taken action. With a "azu" sound, Ling Tian immediately flashed forward by almost 20 feet, his long sword akin to a spark of electricity chopping down relentlessly. Li Zu's white robes waved, as though coordinating with him. Just as his sword came down, her figure had already moved to directly below his sword, her 2 hands half opened like orchids, one above and one below, just like the 1,000-hand bodhisattva. All one could see within range was her slim jade-like fingers that seemed to have actually turned into a sturdy impenetrable wall. From the air, minute sounds rang out continuously, sounding like raindrops from a torrential downpour landing on the banana leaves within the courtyard. However, this exchange was broken with a flash of white robes as Li Zu suddenly ascended higher up, with an inky black blur that was Ling Tian hot on her heels. Li Zu suddenly flipped around when she was above in the air, and used the gravity to pull her downwards. The 2 of them collided head-on once again. "THxChemSci, how clean!" Ling Tian smacked his lips as he looked on the ground, his face in deep regret. What a waste of good labor, not sending these 2 guys to the road one to do the cleaning. Ling Tian laughed out, joyfully questioning, "Young noble, what is a road?" "Oh, a broken bar road. A broken bar is actually a pavement used for horses to travel on." Ling Tian stammered something out. "I see. It's much simpler saying it that way." "Young noble, you're really a genius." Ling Chen nodded with understanding. Ling Tian had a head full of black lines. The situation in the battlefield changed once more as the 2 of them collided into each other, bouncing up and down as clashing noises sounded repeatedly from the bundle that was them fighting. It was just that they controlled their output of power, restricting it to the extremely small space around them. If not for their meticulous control, just their strength was enough to destroy the entire courtyard once they started battling. How would it be like the current situation, where the bonfire Ling Kai was managing to still blaze straight up without the slightest flicker? Seeing the 2 duelists, Ling Kai, Dian, and Lei all broke out in a cold sweat. The 3 little fellows never thought that this Li Zu woman would actually possess this level of strength. With the slimmer build of a woman, she could actually take on Ling Tian head-on while being unarmed and defenseless, and not fall into a disadvantage. Thinking about how the 3 of them did not give 2 hoots about her due to her relationship with Ling Tian, they all felt a chill. They glanced at each other, immediately wiping off the sweat on their foreheads. Ling Kai spoke with some lingering fear, "I even asked Brother Jian yesterday to let me help him teach that girl a lesson. A broken bar, my goodness. Thank God he wanted to do it with his own hands, or else see a broken bar." Ling Dian also wiped off his sweat as he stared with a face of shock at the white blur. "Little dog egg, I really admire your courage." Little Dog Egg was his nickname in Ling Kai's childhood years, and he would usually flare up when someone talked about it. However, he actually remained dazed, forgetting to flare up like he normally did. Gazing at the two fighters, Ling Tian spoke with some suspicions. Why is Sister Li Zhu putting herself at the short end of the stick, not using her private techniques, nor her agile movement techniques, and instead choosing to fight head-on with Ling Tian? Isn't that being disadvantageous to her? Ling Tian smirked. One is because Ling Tian is also doing the same and not using his full strength, thus Li Zhu would naturally conserve. With that demon as his character, she would usually keep at least a few trump cards hidden. The other reason is that your sister Li Zhu is angry, which also means that Ling Tian is in for some deep trouble. Why is that so? How is Ling Tian in trouble? Ling Tian had a confused expression, her eyes wide open as she asked. Ling Tian smiled as he dabbed her nose, saying, "If a guy were to lose out in his advantageous aspect in clashing head-on with a frail lady, or even draw, and with the lady not even using her private techniques, would it be an embarrassment?" Ling Tian suddenly understood, and began gurgling in laughter as she spluttered, "Sister Li Zhu is just too wicked." Ling Tian pursed his mouth, thinking, your sister Li Zhu is far more wicked than that. This is merely an appetizer. Little lass, just wait and see. You'll definitely open up your mouth in shock, and cold sweat will drip down your back." An explosion sounded at this time, and a black and white blob split apart as they flew to opposite directions. But before their bodies hit the ground, a wave of chilling cold killing intent soared up into the sky, as though the doors to hell had just opened, releasing millions of ghosts and spirits. Within the air, a stench of blood pervaded one's nose. Ling Tian leisurely landed, his black robes billowing behind him and his figure straight like the sword. Both his eyes were ice cold like his blade, his figure seeming to have transformed into a peerless weapon, as though his one slice could cut apart a mountain. Ling Tian finally could not bear the embarrassment of being evenly matched in a head-on battle and showed off his true skills. Li Zhu put on a mocking smile as her figure slowly floated down. Her robes gently fluttered, and suddenly an extreme cold was blasted out with her as the epicenter. The battlefield was quickly covered in a thin layer of frost, sparkling and translucent. It shimmered in the sunlight as though there were ice sprites moving around inside the ice. Even in such a hot and humid weather, the ice showed signs of thickening, and only a short moment passed before the battlefield became a frozen winterland. Divine Ice Formula. The extreme frost seemed to even freeze the space around the entire battlegrounds, and everyone felt as though this frost could freeze anything it touched, including Ling Tian's killing intent. Maybe even the bonfire currently burning not far away. The surging frozen air slowly enveloped around Ling Tian, just like an ancient ice dragon, brandishing its claws as it rushed towards its enemy. It brought with it a world of ice and frost. They normally disdained from taking action, but once they moved, they would use their full strength. This was Li Zhu's method of attacking, unyielding and aggressive beyond belief, pushing Ling Tian straight down the path of hell. If Ling Tian could not break past Li Zhu's imposing frost energy, then he would immediately lose. Standing on the side, Ling Kai and the rest lost all color on their faces. Wasn't this big sister Ling Tian's divine ice formula that was unique to her? How could it also appear on this woman? Looking at her control, it was as though she had mastered it to a more profound level as compared to Ling Tian. What was going on? In fact, Li Zhu's attainments in the divine ice formula far outstripped that of Ling Tian. Even though Ling Tian had an innate talent above people, with her obtaining Ling Tian's patient teachings since young, and furthermore having consumed precious cultivation materials, she still wasn't able to match up to Li Zhu's 2 lifetimes worth of purity for divine ice formula. There was still a gap between the two of them. Ling Kai and Gang shared a look, the same thought appearing in their hearts. Brother Jian is in deep SHT this time. Ling Kai anxiously looked at the pot on top of the bonfire, its top just beginning to emit clouds of steam. He could not help but feel his anxiousness rise, wanting to open the pot now so they would end in a draw. Seeing Ling Kai in a panic, Ling Lei persuaded him, "There's no need to worry, it's not like you don't know the skills of Brother Jian." While the young noble has agreed to the duel, in the end, it's still between his people, so he will not make it a life or death one. Once Brother Jian activates his killing intent, He will be totally different. It's not like he's bound to lose. Ling Kai instead shot him a glare. I'm precisely afraid of Brother Jian using his killing intent. Don't you know, Brother Jian cannot control his strength after activating it? And what if he kills the lass? Ling Dian and Ling Lei both recalled his point and their faces changed. If that was the case, then this was nothing good at all for them. Damn it! Ling Kai smacked his thigh as he called out. Ling Lei and Dian turned their attention over and their faces changed as well. The thing they worried the most was about to become reality. On the battlefield, Ling Jian snorted angrily, pointing his sword to the ground as violent sword energy poured out in torrents. It covered the heavens and earth, to the point that it repelled a path within the frosty energy surrounding the area. On the edge of the sword, a billowing killing intent surged out, and Ling Jian seemed to almost have teleported in front of Li Zhu, his sword raised and ready to stab towards Li Zhu's throat. Under the tremendous pressure let off by Li Zhu, Ling Jian had finally burst forth with his fullest potential. He threw aside all caution and moved to kill. At this moment, his eyes only had his opponent, his enemy. Ling Jian seemed to have surpassed the fastest instantaneous speed a person could achieve. Li Zhu had yet to see Ling Jian move, but his sword was suddenly a few inches away from her throat. This was the most outstanding sword of Ling Jian's life, his most perfect, as well as his most decisive strike. Chapter 557, Fighting Experience. If his opponent was not Li Xue, a broken bar, her eyebrows knitted, and Li Zhu's body suddenly shifted horizontally. If Ling Jian's blade could be considered like a flash of electricity, then Li Zhu's movement technique would be classified as faster than the flash, and what was even faster was her hands, which suddenly chopped towards Ling Jian's wrist. Ling Jian's reactions were in no way slow, quickly flipping his wrist while his body remained charging forward. However, he retracted his wrist as he did so, such that the original place of his wrist had now been replaced by a bright and gleaming sword. If Li Zhu failed to control her hand, then it would be sending it up for the slaughter. Good! Li Zhu shouted out in praise, as her chopping hand turned into a palm strike, heavily impacting the sword's body. A vibration passed through the sword as the divine ice formula collided against the true energy from the divine shocking dragon formula, causing a cloud of white fog to rise in the air. This sort of incredibly fast exchange showcased both sides' ingenious changes, and right now, it was likely not even 10 people in this world could achieve this standard. Both of them let out a low shout at the same time, mutually circling each other, before breaking off in opposite sides. Just as they were about to fall, they reversed their retreating momentum, converting it to attack as a palm and a sword struck out. It's finally started. The main course has just arrived. On the other side, Ling Tian chuckled as he muttered to himself. Wanting to trump against someone I've trained for over a decade without wasting a bit of strength? Even if it's you, I'm afraid it's not so easy. Maybe even if you were to use your full strength, to beat up Ling Jian is no simple task. Ling Chen tightly held onto Ling Jian's arm, staring spellbound at the two engaging in an all-out fight. Young noble, how come Sister Li Zhu's divine ice formula was so easily broken through by Jian? This doesn't make sense. Is there anything else involved? Having practiced the same mystical cultivation, while Ling Chen was inferior, there was only a small difference, and she could naturally spot that there was a problem. Even if Ling Chen herself were to attack using her divine ice formula, Ling Jian would not be able to break it so easily, let alone the higher cultivation Li Zhu. That's the price to pay for playing too excessively with your opponent. Ling Tian snorted before continuing. She feels that just knocking down Ling Jian in that way would not be thrilling enough, thus she wanted to use close combat to beat Ling Jian up into a pig head. Thus she started to scheme. However, it seems that she has shot herself in her foot this time. While her strength indeed outstrips Ling Jian, having Ling Jian open up his Azura killing intent, his capabilities will become stronger and fiercer. To suppress him in this short period of time will not be possible. Having fought till now, the true victor cannot be decided in reality anymore. Jian has really improved a lot during this time. I'm afraid that I am no longer his match. A sense of envy flashed through Ling Qian's face as she sighed. Ling Tian let out a sound of assent. The reason why Li Zhu ended up in this bitter situation can be summarized in one word: underestimation. Chinner, you have to remember this phrase, Even a lion has to use its full strength when catching a rabbit. Today is an extremely good lesson. No matter whom you face in the future, never underestimate them. The most effective way is to gain the advantage through striking first, and allowing your enemy to turn into a dead person in the shortest amount of time. Your character is too kind, which is why you should let this be a warning to you. However, Broken Bar, was Li Zu really in trouble because she underestimated her opponent? For someone who used to belong to a huge family as a direct descendant, would she make such a trivial mistake? Instead of saying that Li Zu underestimated her enemy, it would be better to say that Ling Tian was actually just using this chance to remind Ling Tian the dangers of underestimation. In reality, the real objective of this fight was clearly known to only two people, Li Zu and Ling Tian, who understood Li Zu best. Right now, Ling Tian was akin to an exceptionally sharp treasured sword. Ling Tian had successfully smelted him out through trial and fire, and the blade had already taken shape, even showing off its ability, as though it would never be in a disadvantageous position. However, this also resulted in a unique point, which was the fact that as strong he might be, he didn't know how to go with the flow and be soft at times. Furthermore, the harder and stronger something was, the easier it was to break. A spirit to advance continuously without fear was something that was no doubt needed, but it was still needed for someone to be undaunted by dangers. To put it bluntly, it was to only protect the bare minimum needed for survival, and what Li Zu was doing today was simply to throw this sword back into the furnace for resmelting, by giving the most amount of pressure towards him so he could showcase his talent by discovering his own weaknesses and removing them from within himself. Only through repeated smelting and quenching, removing all the impurities within common iron, can it then become a real godly weapon. And the real godly weapons will not be like ordinary weapons, showcasing their sharpness. A weapon displaying its sharpness on the outside can never compare with a godly weapon that can retract all its aura at will. Currently, what Li Zu was doing was to attack and force this piece of steel to remove all its impurities through hammering it repeatedly. As such, Ling Tian's outcome for this battle would be even worse as compared to his fight with Ling Tian, based on Ling Tian's estimation. Indeed, he only heard a cute laugh come out from Li Zu's mouth before a slapping noise was heard and Ling Tian flew out together with his sword. Li Zu had employed her erratic movement technique, slapping ruthlessly down on Ling Tian's back. Ling Tian yelled, and his back muscles tightened. His sword arm whirled and a beautiful ray of sword light flashed into reality, akin to a flying mountain as it brought an overwhelming pressure towards Li Zu. Glancing at the pot emitting hot steam at the corner of the wall, Ling Tian smiled. Li Zu is finally going to take action. Chinner, watch carefully. This battle, as well as how Li Zu operates her divine ice formula, are all a form of learning various points for you. There are lots of nuances inside that you have to take note of. For example, do you know why she first constructed a ground of frost and ice? Ling Tian paused to think, and replied with a startled expression, was she already preparing that for her attacks later? Ling Tian only laughed. When would be considered later? She long ago exceeded everyone's anticipations. Earlier on, when she had used the dirt and dust to attack, she was already digging the trap. As for Ling Tian, this fool, he actually stupidly followed her actions and gathered all the dust, throwing them to the side of the field. He only took that as a purely physical attack, really digging his own grave. Because he was too focused on his own body capabilities, he neglected the fact that the arena, and atmosphere, as well as the other surrounding factors, even luck, which can change the tides. This knowledge is something Ling Tian lacks. Pausing for a while, he continued, the icy field and surroundings work to restrict Ling Tian, but to those who cultivate the divine ice formula, it's akin to being a fish in water, making it easy for one to continuously change directions. If Ling Tian had kept the dirt under his feet previously, then it would be able to cancel out part of the threat brought by the divine ice formula. While it would still be at a disadvantage, but at least if one watched carefully, they could persist and hold on, maybe waiting till the water in the pot boiled. A pity, this guy made the entire battlefield spick and span, and that's as good as bringing disaster upon oneself. How can he still survive? Ling Tian replied with a little unwillingness, But Jian did not know that Sister Li Zhu uses the same type of divine ice formula like I do. Thus for him to remove all the dirt is still considered acceptable. While he's disadvantaged now, this is something unforeseen and he cannot be blamed for losing the battle. Dum-dum, Ling Tian knocked on her head. In a battle, anything can happen with anything in your surroundings, even a piece of a leaf, a branch, or even a small piece of dirt. All of these can actually be used as tools to fight. Do you really have to use a real knife or spear to kill someone before it is considered a victory? If one does not know how to utilize their natural surroundings to their advantage, they will never step into the throne, which symbolizes the peak of martial arts. Your own strength is definitely the most important, but when two fighters of similar strengths clash, then external elements will decide the victor. Li Zhu's capabilities far outstrip Ling Tian and by right should not need to use such methods, but she tried to drag out the battle, doing close combat and ignoring her strengths, thus their strengths were pulled closer together. If Li Zhu wants to win, then she will have to rely on external elements. Just like the dirt you saw just now, it might be useless in your eyes, but if scattered out now it would allow Ling Tian to be more stable when standing and allow him to focus his attention less on avoiding the ground. He would naturally be able to use more strength in his attacks. Furthermore, the dust could be used at critical moments to blind an enemy. You could even utilize the wine to stir up the dust, allowing you to attack relentlessly while the enemy tries to find you. Look, such a useless dirt in your eyes can actually have so many uses, changing the scene of the battlefield in a moment. Ling Chen was stunned beyond belief. She had never thought that even the tiniest bit of dust could have such importance in Ling Tian's eyes. Ling Tian paused for a while before musing. Right now, the only external elements that can benefit Ling Tian would be sunlight and dust, but he actually shifted all the dust away on his own accord. As for sunlight, a broken bar. Chinner, did you notice that the moment Li Zhu activated her movement techniques, she has always been facing her back towards the sun? Don't look down on such small point. All of this can determine victory or defeat. Ling Chen spoke in an utterly convinced tone. So that's the case. No wonder why young noble likes to seek refuge in places with complicated terrain. This is because every object can play a role in your eyes, and you can use them to their fullest effect. Furthermore, these objects do not catch any attention, and will naturally not leak out your location. Chinner has had her eyes opened this time. Ling Tian only calmly replied, "This is what you call experience." After experiencing so many life and death battles, if you cannot gain enlightenment on such things, then you would be too much of a failure. However, Ling Tian now already has enough capability. What he really lacks is first, his state of mind, and second, experience. Compared to Li Zhu, the gulf between them is huge. Ling Chen pursed up her lips into a smile. But since you've taught Jian all your skills, then doesn't it mean that he actually knows all this already? Chapter 558, 8 Mistakes. Ling Tian let out a laugh as he exclaimed, "Ling Chen, do you know what is experience? An outsider's experience is merely an explanation or a story. Only when you actually meet with the same situation can the meaning you derive from it be considered yours, and that's experience. Any experience has to undergo a process, and is not something which can be learned just by me telling you. What I can do is only to point you in the right direction. That's already overly excessive, and if I were to put it bluntly, the effect is far worse. This is what we call able to grasp but unable to put into words." Chuckling, Ling Tian turned his gaze towards the two people duking it out, as he meaningfully continued, "For example, take all that I've said to you previously. When you actually come across a similar scenario, would you be able to find the opportune timing to utilize it? I doubt so, right? This is because of what I told you before, thus you will not find the best timing to utilize such elements. But rather think of me, before thinking of what I said, then carry it out." However, this would have wasted too much time. When experts clash, life and death are decided in a split second. Experience is about moving purely based on muscle memory. This is called real experience. Just merely relying on explanations without actually going through life and death scenarios will not give you true comprehension. Real skill lays outside the poems. Ling Tian recited. Ling Chen assented in an absent-minded manner, her brows slightly furrowed as she tried to digest his words. Ling Tian's words had opened up a huge new door for her, allowing her to see a new territory yet unexplored in her life. As for the theory behind every experience, only when your martial arts have reached a certain stage can I then tell you about it. If your realm is too low, and you chase after such a stage, it might even cause you to regress. Any sort of explanation has to have strength as a foundation. The reason why Li Zu could create such advantageous situations for herself relies on that, Ling Tian concluded, and no longer spoke. While the two of them were conversing, the situation inside the arena once again took on a heaven-shaking change. Upon seeing that the time allocated was ending, Li Zu did not pull any more punches. Her body shot forwards like lightning as she fully revolved her divine ice formula, entrapping the entire area in opaque white fog. Everyone could only see the rolling white fog, not knowing what was happening inside the area. Only the sounds of fists hitting flesh continuously sounded, and from the corner, Ling Kai and Gang's faces were sporting an ashen color, all their eyebrows continuously twitching. Every time they heard a particularly loud thump, all of them would spasm a bit, as though the actual hit was directed towards them. Ling Jian's grunts sounded quite a few times, from soft to loud, until they all combined into one cacophony. Ling Qian sighed at this and said, "Jian is really pitiful." Hearing the sounds, it seems like Sister Li Zu is not even thinking of being merciful. Following her words, as though in reply to her, an angry cry sounded from Ling Jian, followed by a clunk as a long sword flew out of the white fog, embedding itself a hair's breadth from Ling Kai. As it turned out, Ling Kai did not wish for Ling Jian to be humiliated, and hence had tried to secretly insert his own pure yang energy to further heat up the point. Who would have thought that the moment he inserted it, the sword akin to shooting down from the heavens shocked him so much his soul almost left his body. The white fog was getting more and more voluminous, the slapping sounds also increasing in intensity until it nearly converted into a continuous stream of sounds. However, the person beating seemed to be extremely in control to the point that there was still no blood on the ground. The control of those punches seemed to have reached the stage of infinitesimal control. Ling Tian sighed. It seemed that Ling Jian was really down on his luck. Initially, this sparring session could have been conducted with a more peaceful atmosphere, but he just had to be a smart aleck and rouse the ire of Li Zu to the point that this happened. When he came out, Ling Kai and group probably would not be able to recognize who he was anymore. Real broken bar. Suddenly, Ling Kai and group started to jump up excitedly, as though they were cats whose tails had been stepped on. The water is boiling, boiling. Stop the broken bar, hurry and stop. A white blur flashed across, and Li Zu flew out looking exceptionally beautiful. She somersaulted once in the air before gently landing beside Ling Tian. Gently tucking her hair behind her ear, she exhaled for quite a bit before saying a sentence that would cause even Ling Tian's head to explode. How exhilarating. So good. I haven't felt so good for such a long time. The other party, Ling Jian, seemed to not have any movement at all. A broken bar. The white fog was quickly dissipated by Ling Kai and Gang, but when they saw the state that Ling Jian was in, everyone, including Ling Tian, was struck dumb, and they all felt a chill up their spines. Suddenly, the gaze everyone gave towards Li Zu was as though she was a demon that had just crawled out from hell. This was especially so for Ling Kai and Gang, which included killing intent. Ling Jian was actually very a-hole. By a-hole, it meant that there was no broken skin, no muscles exposed, and even his black robes were perfectly clean on his body. One of the reasons why he was so clean would be because of the dust they removed previously. However, the same cannot be said for his body. The most eye-catching point was that his robes did not conform to his body anymore. One could clearly see that his robes that become too small. In other words, after fighting, Ling Jian had somehow grown fat. A broken bar. As for his face, it was a little more difficult to explain. His two eyes were akin to that of a panda, the bruises around them so dark they were almost black. This was accompanied by his skinny face having expanded like Maitreya 1. This was especially prominent on his lips, which swelled so much they looked like sausages. On the top of his head, his hair could not hide the 7 or 8 new lumps formed, making Ling Tian think of the head of Buddha himself. Li Zu could be considered having propriety even when beating someone up. She only made Ling Jian's muscles all swell up, to a frightening point, yet caused near zero damage to his tendons and bones, allowing those audiences to be fearful yet in admiration of her. Just this accurate control she had was enough to let people feel far inferior to her abilities. Even Ling Tian had to bow down to her. They are all flesh wounds, and will heal in 2 days. Li Zhu did not even blink as she spoke. Open up his acupoints, and let his internal energy circulate a bit. This should resolve some swelling. This will not be a hindrance for him to drink all 9 bowls of gold thread soup. Ling Tian glared at Li Zhu, not knowing whether to laugh or scold her. As it turned out, she had already restricted Ling Tian at a certain point, sealing his acupoints and treating him as a pure sandbag. No wonder her control of strength was so good. Hitting a person who could not retaliate, as and when you wish, how could it not be an awesome experience? No wonder that lass had immediately filled up the entire arena with white fog to restrict everyone's eyesight. She did not want anyone to see what she was trying to do. This demoness really lived up to her name, and one couldn't help but be amazed. However, that Ling Tian was also too silly. Even after falling into her trap and not being able to retaliate, he still did not make a single sound. Ling Tian sighed, and tapped out with a finger. Freeing his acupoints, Ling Tian suddenly let out a ferocious howl as he leapt up. Following a sharp intake of breath as he forced open an eye, he glared at Li Zhu in anger as he howled, "Li Zhu, how dare you humiliate me like this? I'll not rest until one of us is dead." "Enough," Ling Tian boomed out, "not resting until one of you is dead? Someone can treat you like a sandbag to beat, so what makes you think that you can fight to the death with them? If you really want to fight to the death, then you had better think about how many times you will need to reincarnate. Defeat means defeat, and if you want to bet, then you have to be willing to face the consequences. Instead of carefully pondering about how you lost, you're actually throwing my face here. Ling Tian, you disappoint me." Ling Tian's red and swollen face miraculously turned pale, and he silently stood on the spot, not daring to whisper a single word. Still possessing some residual anger, Ling Tian grumbled, "Based on your martial arts level, even though Li Zhu is still above you by 1 entire realm, you still shouldn't have been so easily defeated. If this was a life and death battle, you should still be able to drag her down with you. However, you lost so embarrassingly and so easily. Haven't you figured something out from this? Why did I lose?" The anger from Ling Tian's face quickly receded, as he frowned and began to recall. The more he thought, the more he began to sweat. Ling Tian only coldly stared at him. "Realized it yet?" Ling Tian quivered, straightening his body as he admitted in shame, "Yes, I underestimated my opponent. I never thought that Miss Li's martial arts would be so profound, almost above all the opponents I've faced. I completely neglected this point, and even looked down on her, which resulted in this loss. I believe that's the reason I lost." "That's right, it is one of the reasons. However, is it just so? Are there any others?" Ling Tian looked at Ling Tian and meaningfully probed. After remaining silent for a while, Ling Tian continued, "I was also too eager to take revenge and desired instant gratification. Thus my mental state was not stable. This should also be a reason." The sentence made Ling Tian burst into cold laughter. "It turns out that you only found 2 reasons. Wrong. You're deeply mistaken. In this battle, you committed at least 7 grave errors. Any one of them would be enough to take your life, or at least affect the final outcome of the battle. As for what you put as a main reasons, those were the most insignificant reasons." 7? How a broken bar? How is this possible? Ling Tian opened his eyes wide in shock, unable to find words. As a seasoned killer of over 100 battles, how could he not know what mistakes he made within his fight? Even with only one mistake, it was enough to consign him to eternal damnation, let alone 7. Ling Tian mercilessly spat. The first, failing to understand the enemy, failing to probe her secrets, and then taking the initiative to seek battle. "I didn't malign you, right?" Ling Tian lowered his head. "Yes." "The second, you viewed yourself too highly, only clear about your achievements and not others, right?" "Thirdly, when Li Zhu blew off the dirt to create a trap, not only were you unaware of her intentions, but you even copied her, wholeheartedly dropping into the trap." Ling Tian's points were like swords as he indifferently rattled on. "Trap?" Ling Tian raised his head in surprise. "That's right, trap. You should know by now that Li Zu cultivates the divine ice formula, right? And her realm is even above that of Ling Tian's. You should know the specialty of the divine ice formula, right? If I don't call it as you jumping wholeheartedly into the trap, then what is it? Oh, a broken bar. Ling Tian came to his senses. The most serious is actually your fourth mistake. Li Zu had started with clashing head-on with you, fighting you to a draw. At that time, your darned pride couldn't take it any longer, and you chose to break from the confinement, attacking with your strongest strike first. From that instant, your mental state became unstable, allowing Li Zu to use your anger to lead you by your nose around the battlefield. Which is to say, Li Zu's anticipation and plans had already completely succeeded. If you had continued to clash head-on, Li Zu would definitely lose out in the long run because of her natural build, which makes her weaker physically compared to you. At that time, she would begin to come out with other ideas, and that would be to your advantage. But you didn't. Am I right? Ling Tian was already sweating bullets at this point. The fifth, when Li Zu activated her divine ice formula, you would have noticed that it was her true capability, but why did she only activate it after a certain time? This was because her plan had been achieved, and you had foolishly dropped straight down on it. Thus she chose to carry out the next phase. But you didn't consider this point, taking the lead to enter your opponent's domain and initiate the battle. You fell right into the center of her palm. The sixth is that you have experience against fighting Ling Tian, and you do know that the divine ice formula isn't something easy to deal with. Thus, when Li Zu released the white fog, you should have flown out at the very first second, choosing to attack in long range or use guerrilla tactics. But you didn't. You actually did not know what's good for you, dashing headlong into the white fog to do battle. Isn't that placing your head on the chopping board for her? The perfect archetype of seeking one's own death. How could you not lose? The seventh, which is about your positioning. Even if you're facing off against someone of the same capabilities as you should never face the sun while fighting, especially when that the opponent is using the divine ice formula. You know very well that the refraction of sunlight from the ice is enough to completely disorientate all your senses, but you didn't stop to think, dumbly maintaining your current position, to the point that when your opponent had moved with their backs facing the sun, you were still unaware, only wanting to charge forward at her. You were completely led by the nose. With your current standards, you still want to fight for life and death. Do you think you have the qualifications? Ling Tian took in a deep breath at this time, sweeping his gaze over Ling Tian. Li Zu's capabilities and cultivation already outstrip yours. With the addition of so many traps, she can display more than 90% of her overall battle strength, almost like she was in the right place at the right time. The gap between the two of you widened even further. It would be an injustice if you didn't lose. Ling Tian's back was soaked through with sweat, as he felt like digging a hole to bury himself. These mistakes, no matter which one, if they had happened in a fight between top-level experts, it would make the losing side admit that they deserved to lose. However, he had never thought that he would actually be the offending one this time around. Today's loss was really not an injustice. In addition, there's the eighth mistake. Standing on the side, Li Zu laughed as she said, "Your desire to win was too heavy. Even more so is the desire to prove to Tanj how much you've improved from the last time. Hence you only had the thought to finish me off in one blow. This sort of attitude is something that I was very happy to take advantage of." Ling Jian's face was as swollen as a tomato, and he hung his head low in shame, wanting to simply bury his head in his pants. 8 mistakes. At this moment, Ling Jian seemed to have a desire to pull out his sword and commit suicide. At the side, Ling Kai, Lei and the rest were all staring in shock as well. They did not even catch any of the mistakes that Ling Tian and Li Zu had spoken about, but there were actually 8 life-threatening ones. Ling Tian snorted as he continued, "Don't think you guys are alright standing there. Out of the 8 that were mentioned, you guys would have committed at least 6 of them if any one of you went up to fight. Based on your current levels, even if it was 3 against 1, you might not necessarily be Li Zu's match. Understand?" This few words caused the fellows to duck their heads down in shame. What first pavilion? What top assassins? Such an awe-inspiring name, but how did you guys even get it? Being so sloppy and careless, How can I ever leave you to accomplish greater things next time? Our enemies will only get stronger and more vicious. Are you guys going to continue being negligent?" On the side, Ling Tian warmly smiled in encouragement. "Young noble's words are to pinpoint your mistakes so that you guys will not repeat them again. This is so that Sister Lizu's efforts today will not be wasted. This is a good lesson for you all." Ling Tian angrily snorted. It was supposed to be a good thing. But he did not continue berating. Ling Jian and company gave grateful looks to Ling Tian in return. Lizu also gently laughed, and spoke with some mischievousness. "But, I still have to thank you, Ling Jian, for not using your ultimate one-step, one-kill technique. You've shown mercy to me. However, you had better treat your injuries soon. I was quite heavy-handed just now." "Oh? Since Ling Kai and the rest have just finished boiling the medicine, you should drink it while it's hot. It will help you with the injuries." The faces of that particular group became ugly to behold. Looking at the bubbling pot sitting quietly in the corner, everyone felt the urge to have a broken bar. Lizu winked at Ling Tian, before turning to walk away, murmuring, "Actually, it doesn't matter whether you drink it or not. It's just a random bet anyways. Forget it, it's up to you. I won't be there, so I'll take your word that you drank it. I'll be leaving first, then." Ling Tian almost choked. Is this how a person encourages someone? This was practically forcing them down a dead end. And indeed a broken bar. "Stop right there." Ling Jian rushed over angrily. "One must be prepared for the consequences when they bet." "I, Ling Jian, have never been afraid of losing. I'll drink them right now for you to see." Ling Jian here does not back out of his words. "I'm definitely not someone who will not live up to their promises." This was followed by him walking gallantly towards the pot. 9 bowls were laid out in a flash and were completely filled up with gold thread water. After a moment of hesitation, he closed his eyes and began to drink them one by only a broken bar. Moving, such a moving sight. What a tragically moving sight. Seeing Ling Jian valiantly drink down the pungent gold thread water, everyone had their eyebrows twitching violently. The third bowl had just gone down, but Ling Jian's face was already in an amazing state. What was bringing trouble on oneself? Reaping what you sow? Lifting up a rock to smash one's foot? Ling Jian's face was the answer to all 3 questions stated above. How could the gold threads he had painstakingly collected be so nice to drink? Those were all top of the line. Ling Jian's face was so screwed up that the lines on his face seemed to merge into only a broken bar. Lizu let out a sigh, as though bemoaning the state of mankind as she recited, "If heaven creates a disaster, one can still escape, but if you bring forth disaster, then how can you survive?" Then she walked away. Ling Jian stared at Lizu's retreating back with flames coming out of his eyes, ruthlessly throwing the last bowl of gold thread water into his mouth, a broken bar. Ling Tian stood by the side with his arms crossed, coldly watching as Ling Jian drank down bowl after bowl, his expression one of icy indifference. The others all stood at the side, not daring to utter a single word. Even when Ling Jian finished the 9 bowls and went back to stand in front of Ling Tian, he still remained silent. Ling Chen carefully looked at Ling Tian, timidly probing, "Young nobly broken bar?" Staring coldly at them, Ling Tian stretched out 2 fingers, forming the number 8, a ring, as he hissed, "From today on, I don't want to see these 8 mistakes appear in any one of you. Today's battle must be engraved into your heads." Ling Jian's mistakes must be completely eliminated, and as much as possible, absorb and learn from Lizu's calculation as well as her utilization of external elements. He swept his gaze over once, before asking, "Do you know why I agreed to this battle? Why I did not speak a word even though Lizu obviously went overboard?" The 4 shook their heads in response. Ling Tian solemnly stressed, "In this world, there are only 2 who can force Ling Jian to commit those 8 mistakes. One is me, the other is Lizu. No one else can do so, even Justice himself. The most he could do would be to kill you in one move. Against me, you guys will not put in your maximum effort, which will not be able to force out all your bad habits. At least not as thoroughly as Lizu. What Lizu showed you was precisely what you are most lacking in. If you guys could utilize the external elements in your own battles, then your killing power would jump up by multiple times. At that time, even if it was against Justice, you would still retain your life. Go back and ruminate. Today's battle is merely a lesson for you guys. As for what you have picked up, it will serve as the best protective screen in your future battles. Our enemies will not give you any chance, while opportunities will have to be fought for, and grabbed when they come by. This lesson is mainly to teach you how to grasp the opportunities. After he finished, he put his arm around Ling Tian's waist and left. Behind him, the four of them had expressions of deep thoughts. To Ling Tian, this battle was like a huge turning point. So long as he could absorb the essence of this battle, he would have truly stepped into the realm of the peak experts. And as for the pressure Li Zhu gave him, as well as the beating and humiliation, they were all catalysts to help Ling Tian achieve this goal. Towards this point, Ling Tian had absolute certainty. Thank you for your continued following. Please support us by subscribe to encourage our continued creation, and press the bell to notify new chapter from us. Thank you.